This is a compilation of over 2.5 hours of Elder Scrolls lore to fall asleep, so sit back, relax, and grab your popcorn. Let's kick things off with Elder Scrolls' greatest secrets. Skyrim has been out for over a decade, and most players still haven't found half of what's actually in it. Not Easter eggs, not glitches. Real lore, hidden quests with no markers, secrets buried so deep, the only way to find them is to slow down and actually look. Today we're covering 10 of the best, starting with a ghost that quietly destroys everything you thought you knew about the most important man in Tamriel's history, Old Hroldan. Old Hroldan Inn is one of those places most players pass through once and never think about again. Small, forgettable tavern along the Karth River in the Reach. But rent Tiber Septim's room for 10 gold and sleep there past 1 a.m., and something happens that will change how you understand the civil war you've been fighting. You wake up to the innkeeper Adis, screaming. A ghost is standing in the room, dressed in ancient Nord armor, and when you talk to him, he says one word that breaks everything. He calls you Hjalti. Here's where it gets weird. The ghost is a soldier from a battle fought centuries ago. He tells you that Hjalti promised to make him a sworn brother after they sacked Hroldan together. He asks you to retrieve Hjalti's sword from a nearby Forsworn camp, and when you bring it back, he mentions something specific. The sword masters of Alcair who trained Hjalti. That detail is everything. Official Imperial history says Tiber Septim was a pure-blooded Nord born in Atmora, destined to rule. The Thalmor call him a fraud. The Stormcloaks worship him as their cultural North Star. The entire Civil War runs on competing claims about who he was. But an in-game book called the Arcturian Heresy presents a suppressed alternative account. Tiber Septim's real name was Hjalti Earlybeard, and he trained with swordmasters in Alcair High Rock. That makes him possibly Breton, not Nord at all. The ghost confirms every single detail the heresy claims. He uses the name Hjalti. He references Alcair specifically. He recognizes the Dragonborn as his old commander, most likely because both share dragon blood. This isn't theory. This is Bethesda embedding a counter-history into a ghost that only appears if you rent a specific bed in a specific inn in the middle of nowhere. Most players never find it. Those who do walk away knowing the theological foundation of Skyrim's entire civil war is built on something nobody agreed on, not even the people who were actually there. But if a hidden ghost rewriting Imperial history sounds like a big secret, wait until you hear about the college wizard who accidentally solved the greatest mystery in Elder Scrolls history by vanishing into thin air. Arniel's Endeavor. Arniel Gane is easy to miss. He's a Breton conjurer who shuffles around the Hall of Attainment at the College of Winterhold, muttering about research and refusing to tell anyone what he's actually doing. Most players talk to him once, get nothing useful, and move on. That is a massive mistake. The quest Arniel's Endeavor has 4 phases, and it only unlocks after you've completed hitting the books for the college main quest. The first few stages look like standard fetch work. Collect 10 Dwemer cogs. Track down a shady fence named Enthyr to get a warped soul gem. Use a spell called Arniel's Convection to heat the gem inside Dwemer convectors scattered across Skyrim. Then, in the final phase, Arniel asks for something that should make every Elder Scrolls fan stop dead: keening. If you played Morrowind, you know exactly what that is. Keening is one of the 3 legendary tools of Lord Kagrenac, the Dwemer chief tonal architect. At the Battle of Red Mountain in 1E700, Kagrenac used his tools on the heart of Lorkhan, and the entire Dwemer race vanished. Every single one of them, simultaneously. Nobody knows where they went. It is the biggest unsolved mystery in the franchise. Arniel is trying to replicate it, and here's the kick. He does. You hand him keening. He strikes the warped soul gem with it. There's a flash of light, and Arniel Gane disappears. Completely. No body, no ash, no trace. Exactly like the Dwemer. In Morrowind lore, wielding keening without the protective gauntlet, Wraithguard was supposed to kill the user. Arniel doesn't die. He vanishes. That distinction matters, because it suggests whatever happened to the Dwemer wasn't death. It was something else. Transportation, soul trapping, a different plane entirely. The reward for completing the quest is a conjuration spell that lets you summon Arniel's Shade to fight alongside you, his ghost, which means the game quietly confirms he still exists, somewhere, in some form. Nobody at the college ever mentions he's gone, but as dark as Arniel's fate is, at least we know what happened to him. The Dwemer who created keening in the first place, their story runs even deeper, and it's buried under a mountain, lost to the ages. The Dawnguard DLC has a side quest most people never finish, and some never even start. It's called Lost to the Ages, and it begins in one of 2 ways. Either you pick up a book called The Ethereum Wars by an author named Taran Dreth, or you wander into a Dwemer ruin called Argenthams in the Reach and find a ghost standing in the rubble. The ghost is Katria. She's a Nord scholar, and the first thing she tells you is that the book you might have read, the one credited to Taran Dreth, is hers. He was her apprentice. He stole her research, published it under his own name, and left her to die in the ruins she was exploring for him. She's been haunting Argenthams ever since, and she needs you to finish what she started. What she discovered is this. Around 1E221, Dwemer miners found a deposit of a crystalline material called Etherium deep in Blackreach. It was luminescent blue, connected to Etherius itself, and the artifacts it produced were unlike anything else in Tamriel. 4 Dwemer city-states formed an alliance to mine it: Arkenthams, Raldbathar, Amzulft, and Batharzel. They built a forge beneath Bathoft in the Rift, using magma to smelt the crystal, and for a while it worked. Then greed destroyed everything. The alliance collapsed. The 4 cities went to war with each other over control of the forge and its supply. The conflict lasted decades, draining all 4 of their strength, and when Nordic High King Geller finally conquered them, history credited his military genius. The real reason they fell was that they'd already torn themselves apart from the inside. The Nords didn't defeat the Dwemer defeated themselves. The quest sends you to collect 4 Etherium shards from ruins across Skyrim, which combine into the Etherium crest and reveal a hidden lift to the forge. The Forge Master, a fire-breathing dwarven centurion, guards it. Beat it, and you forge one of 3 genuinely powerful artifacts. But the real payoff is Catria. She witnesses the forge, finds her peace, and moves on to Sovngarde. Justice, after a fashion. Then Tarandreth shows up as a random encounter afterward if you're carrying the artifact. He recognizes it, demands it, and attacks. The game lets you kill the man who stole her life's work. It doesn't announce this. It just happens. But hidden Dwemer secrets aren't exclusive to underground ruins. The most devastating one in the entire game is written on a stone tablet in plain sight, in a tower most players rob without ever stopping to read it. Knight Paladin Gelebor. The Falmer are everywhere in Skyrim. Blind, hunched, feral things that swarm Dwemer ruins and attack on sight. The game treats them as generic dungeon enemies, and most players do too. Kill them, loot them, move on. But the Dawnguard DLC has a quest called Touching the Sky, and buried inside it is a character who reframes everything you thought you knew about what the Falmer actually are. The Forgotten Vale is a hidden region, accessible only through Darkfall Cave. It's enormous, isolated, and almost entirely optional. Deep inside, in a structure called the Chantry of Oriel, you meet Knight Paladin Gelebor. He's a snow elf, not a Falmer, an actual uncorrupted snow elf, the last one you'll ever meet, and he's been waiting inside that chantry for thousands of years. He tells you everything. The snow elves were a civilized people. They had temples, a pantheon, a warrior-priest tradition. Ysgramor's genocidal campaign drove them underground, and the Dwemer offered sanctuary. Gelebor calls what happened next the betrayal. The Dwemer forced the snow elves to consume toxic fungi that caused permanent, irreversible blindness. Then they engineered it so the fungi became essential to the snow elf diet, guaranteeing every generation born underground would be blind from birth. Over thousands of years, enslaved and sightless, they devolved into the creatures you've been killing without a second thought. Gelebor doesn't call them Falmer, he calls them the Betrayed. Here's where it gets darker. His brother, Archcurate Verthur, runs the inner sanctum of the Chantry. The quest sends you through 5 way shrines in a ritual pilgrimage before you reach him, and when you do, the twist lands hard. Verthur is a vampire. He engineered the entire Tyranny of the Sun prophecy, a plan to blot out sunlight and allow vampires to walk freely, as revenge against Oriel for abandoning him after his infection. The holy order you've been making a pilgrimage through was corrupted from the inside by its own leader for centuries, and Gelebor never knew. Players who dig into Gelebor's data found something strange. He doesn't register under Detect Life, Detect Dead, or Aura Whisper. He appears as neither living nor dead, unique among every NPC in the game. What exactly he is after thousands of years of isolated vigil, the game never says. After the quest, he stays at the Chantry, keeping the way shrines open, waiting in case any snow elves who escape the betrayal find their way to him someday. None ever do. But as tragic as Gelebor is, at least his story has context. The next secret we're covering has almost none, and that's exactly what makes it so unsettling. The Ebony Warrior. At level 80, something happens that most players never experience, because most players never reach level 80. You walk into any major city, and a Redguard in full ebony armor approaches you. No quest marker, no warning. He just finds you, and what he says stops the conversation cold. I have done all that can be done. There is nothing left, no quests to be undertaken, no villains to be slain, no challenges to face. Except for you. He tells you to meet him at a camp called Last Vigil in the Velothi Mountains, and he walks away. That's it. No explanation, no context. Just a man who has finished everything and wants you to kill him. Here's the thing. The Ebony Warrior is not a quest about a boss fight. It's meta-commentary on the player. Specifically, the kind of player who reaches level 80 in a game with hundreds of hours of content. Someone who has cleared every dungeon, finished every faction, exhausted every storyline, and has nothing left. Bethesda built this encounter as a mirror. The Ebony Warrior is you, in a different playthrough, at the end of everything. His dying words are, "At last, Sovngarde." He's a Redguard. Sovngarde is the Nordic afterlife. Redguards don't go there. His wish is almost certainly impossible, and the game never resolves it. The combat specs alone tell you how seriously Bethesda took this encounter. He wields an ebony sword of the vampire. He can cast close wounds and conjure Storm Atronach. He uses unrelenting force and disarm, making him the the only non-Nord NPC in the game capable of dragon shouts. He has the Reflect Blows perk, meaning melee power attacks can bounce back and kill you instantly. His armor gives 50% resistance to fire, frost, and shock. He's immune to paralysis, ice form, bend will, and the Wabbajack. He stands at 1.21 scale, taller than even an Altmer. His loot includes a human heart and a Daedra heart. Nobody explains what they're for. Nobody explains anything about him. The community has drawn comparisons to Umbra from Morrowind and Gainor from the Tribunal expansion, both infamous ebony-armored warriors with tragic backstories and punishing difficulty. The pattern is deliberate. Bethesda has been hiding these mirrors inside their games for decades. If you kill him before finishing the main quest, he doesn't appear in Sovngarde. The one place he wanted to reach, the one door that might have been open to him, closes. And the game doesn't say a word about it, but the ebony warrior at least gets to make his case in person. The next secret never announces itself at all. It's hiding in a mad emperor's subconscious, being served by a god who shouldn't exist yet. The Mind of Madness. In Solitude, a filthy beggar named Dervanin wanders the streets asking for help. Most players ignore him. He's dressed in rags, rambling about a master who went on vacation and won't come back. It sounds like nothing, but if you stop and listen, he hands you Pelagius's hip bone and a key to the sealed Pelagius wing of the Blue Palace, a wing nobody uses because everyone inside went insane. Walk in with the bone, and you get pulled into the mind of Emperor Pelagius III, Pelagius the Mad, where a surreal tea party is already in progress. Sitting at the head of the table, cheerful and completely unhinged, is Sheogorath, the Daedric Prince of Madness. He gives you the Wabbajack and sends you to solve 3 trials inside Pelagius's fractured psyche: his paranoia, his night terrors, his anger. Standard Daedric quest, bizarre and funny. But then Sheogorath starts talking. He references the events of TES-4, Oblivion, with a precision that should not be possible. He mentions butterflies, blood, a fox, a severed head, and cheese. Every single reference maps exactly to events from Oblivion that only one person could have witnessed firsthand: the butterflies and the Shivering Isles. DLC. The fox, which is the alias of the Grey Fox from Oblivion's Thieves Guild. The severed head belonging to Mathieu Bellamont's mother in Oblivion's Dark Brotherhood. The cheese is a running joke from the Shivering Isles itself. Here's what that means. In the Shivering Isles expansion for Oblivion, the hero of Kvatch, Oblivion's player character, completes a questline that ends with them literally becoming Sheogorath, not serving him, not being blessed by, mantling him, taking on his identity, his power, his title. The Sheogorath sitting at that tea party in Skyrim 200 years later is the hero of Kvatch. He even says it directly, if you know what to listen for. He describes his title as something that gets passed down from himself to himself every few thousand years. He references Haskell, his chamberlain from the Shivering Isles, by name. The same voice actor, Wes Johnson, plays Sheogorath in both games. What this actually means is that 2 Elder Scrolls player characters are in the same room: the last Dragonborn and the hero of Kvatch, now a Daedric prince, sitting across a tea table inside a dead emperor's mind. And the game never explicitly says it. It just leaves the evidence there piece by piece for players who were paying attention 2 games ago. The entire quest is structured like an Alice in Wonderland fever dream. Mad tea party, surreal logic puzzles, identity confusion at every turn. It's not an accident. The joke and the lore are the same thing, but at least Sheogorath's identity is something you can piece together. The next secret hides its horror in plain sight, told entirely through journals most players walk right past: the Pale Lady. Frostmere Crypt is a Nordic ruin south of Dawnstar with no quest marker pointing to it. You find it by wandering, or you don't find it at all. Most players who do stumble across it sprint through, kill everything, grab the loot, and leave. They miss one of the best written stories in the entire game, told almost entirely through documents scattered across the floor. It starts outside. A bandit named Isa Blackthorn is being attacked, and if you save her, she tells you her friend went crazy and stole the boss's sword. That's all she gives you. Go inside, and the real story unfolds piece by piece through a journal called Kyr's Log. Kyr was running a failing bandit operation. 2 recruits showed up and saved it: Issa and a Khajiit named Rajir. Things turned around. Then, in week 15, a tunnel broke through into something nobody expected: a vast underground forest, completely sealed from the outside world. In the center of it, on a stone monument, sat a sword. Kyr took it as a trophy. Then Rajir started to deteriorate. His note to Issa is the moment the whole thing shifts from bandit drama to something genuinely unsettling. He writes that he sees her in every shadow, hears her voice on every breath of wind, in his dreams, in his ears, in his mind. He calls her the Pale Lady. He says they have to stop her. In the final chamber, Kyr is dying on the floor. Rajir is dead ahead of you, and standing in the middle of the underground forest is the Pale Lady herself, a named Wisp Mother sealed in that chamber since the Merethic era. Here's where it gets dark. An in-game book called Lost Legends reveals her ancient name, Omriel, a figure so dangerous that Ysgramor's own heirs spent decades hunting her before they managed to seal her away. The method was specific: a sword called the Pale Blade, placed on a pedestal in her chamber. That binding held for thousands of years, until Kyr walked in and took the sword as a trophy because he thought it looked nice. The player has 2 options: kill the Pale Lady outright, or return the Pale Blade to the pedestal and rebind her. The game doesn't tell you either of these things. You have to figure it out. And Aisa, if she survives the attack outside, doesn't just disappear. She shows up later at the Moorside Inn in Morthal, grieving, alive. The game tracked her the entire time and never mentioned it. There's no quest marker for any of this. No journal entry pointing you toward Morthal afterward. No achievement. Bethesda just wrote a complete horror story, hid it in an unmarked dungeon, and left it there for whoever happened to slow down long enough to read. But the Pale Lady is at least a mystery you can solve. The next secret is one the Dwemer themselves created, and what it says about them is far more disturbing than any ghost. Kelselmo's Stone. Kelselmo is the court wizard of Markarth, an Altmer scholar who has spent what he describes as 2 human lifetimes studying the Dwemer. His tower above Understone Keep is locked, guarded, and absolutely off-limits to anyone who isn't doing the Thieves Guild questline. Most players who do get inside are there for one reason: steal a rubbing of the stone tablet for the quest hard answers and get out. Copy it with charcoal and paper, hand it to Enthir and Karliah. Move on. Nobody stops to read what the tablet actually says. The stone is a Rosetta Stone for the Falmer language. Parallel columns of Dwemer script and Falmer script side by side, one of the only artifacts in the game that lets scholars translate between the two. Developer Kurt Kuhlman provided the official translation, and what it contains is one of the most chilling pieces of writing in the entire franchise. It is the Dwemer speaking directly to the snow elves they are about to enslave. The text describes what they called the welcoming chambers, spaces built in their depths for the snow elves' comfort and respite. It invites them to partake of the symbol of their bond, the fruit of the stones around them. It tells them that as their vision clouds, as the darkness sets in, they should not fear. They should know only the mercy of the Dwemer and the radiance of their affection, which unbinds their bones to the earth before and sets their final path to the music of their new eternity. Every word of that is a lie, dressed as kindness. The fruit of the stones around them is the toxic fungi. The vision clouding is the blinding. The mercy and the radiance of their affection is forced, permanent, generational disability inflicted on an entire civilization. The Dwemer didn't enslave the snow elves in a fit of cruelty or desperation. They planned it, wrote it down, translated it into Falmer so the snow elves could read their own destruction framed as a gift, and then handed it to them. This is the same species that built the automated cities, the tonal architecture, the brass gods still walking their ruins 1,000 years after their disappearance. They were brilliant, and they used that brilliance to write the most sophisticated propaganda in Tamriel's history, aimed at people they were about to make blind. The phrase 15 and 1 tones embedded in the text is a reference to Dwemer tonal magic, the vibrational systems that powered their entire civilization. It's there to make the text sound ceremonial and sacred. It's window dressing on a genocide. Kelselmo himself refuses to share his research with anyone. That research represents years of personal toil in some of the most dangerous Dwemer ruins in Skyrim. He tells you if you ask. He has spent a lifetime studying the people who did this, and he guards their secrets like treasure. The stone sits in his tower. Most players rob it without reading it, which means most players walked right past the single most damning document in the game and never knew it was there. But at least Kelselmo's horror is academic. The next secret is personal, and it asks a question the Stormcloaks and the Empire both pretend to have answered. What are Nords actually fighting for? Quine's sacred trials. There's no quest marker that leads you to Froki's shack. It sits in the mountains southeast of Ivarstead, a remote cabin with no road going to it and no reason to visit unless you already know it's there. Most players never find it. Those who do find an elderly hunter named Froki Wedded Blade, living alone with his grandson, Haming. Haming is a name you might recognize. He's the boy from the opening sequence of the game, standing in the street in Helgen while the dragon attacks. His parents died in that attack. He survived, and somehow, years into your playthrough, if you find this unmarked cabin in the mountains, he's just there, living quietly with his grandfather, mentioned in passing. No fanfare. But Froki is what this section is about, and Froki is furious. He has zero tolerance for the Imperial Divines, and he says so immediately. He calls them stolen idols, imposter gods sold by silver tongues. The goddess the Imperials call Kinnereth, the gentle deity of wind and air worshipped in temples across Skyrim, Froki calls a pale shadow of the truth. The real goddess is Kine, Shor's widow, sacred to any true Nord hunter, mother of men and beasts. Her veil is the storm. That distinction matters more than it sounds. Kinnereth is a sanitized Imperial export, a divine figure acceptable to the cosmopolitan pantheon the Empire assembled to hold its provinces together. Kine is older, wilder, specifically Norse in character, tied directly to Shor, the Nordic analog of the dead god Lorcan whose heart sat beneath Red Mountain. The Imperials didn't just conquer Skyrim politically. They replaced its gods with friendlier versions and called it the same religion. Froki's quest, Kine's Sacred Trials, sends you to hunt 7 guardian spirits across Skyrim, ghostly, translucent versions of native animals, each one a champion chosen by Kine herself. 3 lesser guardians first, a mud crab, a skeever, a wolf, then 3 greater ones, a bear, a mammoth, a saber cat. Each inhabits an area populated by normal versions of its species, wandering among them, distinguishable only because it glows. The final guardian is a troll inside Grey Winter Watch, near the ritual stone. The reward is Kine's token, an amulet that reduces animal normal damage by 10% and increases bow damage by 5%. Mechanically modest, thematically enormous. Because what Froki is actually doing is passing down a religious tradition the Empire has spent centuries trying to absorb and neutralize. He's an old man in a mountain cabin with no followers, performing sacred rites to a goddess the temples have replaced, teaching them to a stranger because there's nobody else left to teach. The Stormcloak Rebellion gets framed in the game as a political dispute about a throne and a treaty. Kind's Sacred Trials frames it as something older and sadder, a culture watching its gods get renamed and its traditions go extinct one generation at a time. Inside Grey Winter Watch, alongside the Guardian Troll, you find Froki's bow. He left it there. He wanted it to be found by whoever was worthy of the trials. He never mentions it. He just left it. That's the whole quest. No dramatic finish, no villain, no twist, just an old man's faith and a bow he left in a cave for someone he'd never met. And if that quiet tragedy feels like a low-key way to end a section, wait until the final secret, because the last one involves a man who built a museum to the cult that nearly ended the world, and he has absolutely no idea what he's celebrating. Skyrim is full of choices that feel like they matter, but some of them are straight-up traps. From sacrificing a loyal follower for absolutely nothing, to selling a quest item you'll desperately need later, to siding with a faction that secretly helps your worst enemy win. Today, I'm breaking down every single worst decision you can make in Skyrim and why each one burns, starting with a choice that punishes you for being a good person, choosing the sapling. Here's the thing about the Blessings of Nature quest. It wants you to believe you're making a meaningful moral choice. You're not. The setup is simple. Danica Purespring asks you to restore the Gildergreen, that big dead tree in the middle of Whiterun that everybody walks past without caring about. She tells you about Nettlebane, a dagger that can cut into the sacred Eldergleam tree to harvest its sap. Only problem? It's in the hands of a Hagraven out at Orphan Rock. So you trek out there, kill the Hagraven, pry the blade off her corpse, and head to the Eldergleam Sanctuary. But when you actually start hacking away at the tree, Spriggans come pouring out of the ground and start murdering every innocent pilgrim in the cave. People who came there to pray, just getting absolutely destroyed because you needed tree juice. So naturally, the game offers you an alternative. A pilgrim named Maurice Jondrell tags along and suggests a peaceful solution. Pray to Kinnereth, receive a sapling, plant it in Whiterun, and nobody has to die. Beautiful. You feel great about yourself. You chose peace. You protected the pilgrims. You're basically a saint. But here's where it gets funny. The reward is exactly the same either way. Identical. You get Nettlebane, you get a restoration skill point, and Danica gives you the same lukewarm thank you regardless of which path you chose. She actually protests when you hand her the sapling, claiming she can't run the temple without seeing the original tree bloom. Then she just accepts it anyway. All that drama for nothing. The players who went full lumberjack and let the Spriggans massacre a group of innocent worshippers, they got exactly what you got. Zero difference. Skyrim literally trolled you for caring too much about a tree, but at least this one only stings your pride. The next decision on this list can get an innocent person thrown in prison while a serial killer walks free, accusing the wrong person. Blood on the Ice is Skyrim's attempt at a murder mystery, and honestly, it's one of the few quests in the entire game that will actually punish you for being impatient. Most quests in Skyrim don't care how you get to the finish line. This one does. Here's the setup. Women are being murdered in Windhelm, and you're tasked with figuring out who's responsible. The game gives you clues, witnesses, and a trail of evidence scattered across the city, but it also gives you Wunferth the Unliving, a court mage with a reputation for necromancy, a creepy demeanor that screams guilty, and a suspicious amulet connected to the crime scene. He is literally designed to absorb your accusation. Every single detail about this man is a red herring, and most players fall for it immediately. If you go to the steward and accuse Wunferth without finishing the investigation, the guards arrest him on the spot. Case closed, justice served. Except it's not, because while Wunferth sits in a jail cell, another woman turns up dead in the streets of Windhelm. The murders didn't stop. You got the wrong guy, and the game makes sure you know it. The real killer is Calixto Corium, the seemingly harmless museum curator who's been hiding in plain sight the entire time. He's been murdering women and harvesting their body parts to perform a necromantic ritual to resurrect his dead sister, and he continued doing exactly that while you had an innocent man locked up. But here's where it gets worse. The quest doesn't break. It doesn't lock you out. You can still finish it, and that's almost crueler than if it just failed entirely, because now you have to walk back into that prison, look Wunferth in the face, admit you were wrong, and release him, all while knowing that your impatience directly costs someone their life. Most games would just pretend nothing happened. Skyrim forces you to sit in the consequences of your failure and then clean up your own mess anyway. It's genuinely one of the smartest quest designs in the game, but if you think wrongly accusing a mage is bad, wait until you hear what happens when you snitch on a certain jester. Snitching on Cicero. You're walking down the road near Whiterun, minding your own business, and you stumble across a jester standing next to a broken wagon with a coffin on the back. He's talking to himself. He's giggling. He claims the coffin contains his dear, sweet mother, and he desperately needs help getting the wheel fixed so he can deliver her body to its final resting place. Everything about this screams, do not trust this person. His name is Cicero, and the game gives you two options. You can either convince the nearby farmer, Vantus Lorius, to help fix the wagon, or you can report Cicero to the guard patrolling the road. And honestly, reporting him feels like the responsible thing to do. The guy is clearly unhinged. He's transporting a suspicious coffin through the countryside while dressed like a court jester from a nightmare. Any rational person would flag that behavior immediately. But here's where it gets dark. Days after you report Cicero and the guard hauls him away, Vantus Lorius and his wife Curwe turn up dead, both murdered. Whether Cicero escaped and did it himself or the Dark Brotherhood sent someone to handle the situation as payback for his imprisonment, the result is the same. Two innocent people are wiped out because you pointed a finger at a weird guy on the road, and the guilt doesn't stop there. If you later join the Dark Brotherhood, you'll meet Cicero again at the Sanctuary. He remembers you. He remembers exactly what you did. He won't attack you or block your progress through the quest line, but he makes sure you know he hasn't forgotten. That resentment sits in every interaction you have with him going forward. Here's the thing that makes this decision sting even more. The quest, Delayed Burial, is entirely missable. Players who move quickly from Innocence Lost into the Brotherhood questline never encounter Cicero on the road at all. The whole encounter exists almost exclusively to flesh out Cicero as a character and to punish players who act against him before they understand who he is. You didn't stop a criminal. You got two people killed. And the jester you turned in? He's now your coworker, and he knows what you did. But if handing over a jester has consequences, wait until you hear what happens when you hand over an Elder Scroll to a librarian. Selling the Dragon. Elder Scroll to Urag. This one isn't a moral failure. It's not a betrayal. It's not even a bad call. It's the game punishing you for being organized. Here's what happens. You spend hours working through the main quest line, you retrieve the Elder Scroll from Blackreach, you use it at the Throat of the World to learn Dragonrend during Alduin's Bane, and then it just sits in your inventory. This massive, legendary artifact that literally bends time, weighing 20 pounds and doing absolutely nothing. You can't read it again. You can't use it for anything else. It's dead weight. So you do what Skyrim has trained you to do since the moment you picked up your first iron dagger. You sell it. Urag Groshub at the College of Winterhold will happily take it off your hands for 2,000 septims. And honestly, that feels like a win. You just made gold off a quest item. You're a smart, efficient dragonborn who doesn't hoard useless junk. Congratulations. But here's where it gets annoying. The moment you start the Dawnguard DLC and reach the Unseen Visions quest, the game asks you for that exact Elder Scroll. Not a different one, not a copy. That specific Dragon Elder Scroll you sold 40 hours ago because you thought you were done with it. And now you have to go crawling back to Urag and buy it back for 4,000 septims, double what he paid you. You sold a legendary artifact for 2,000 gold, and now the same librarian is charging you 4,000 to get it back. You can talk him down to 3,000 if you haven't become Archmage yet, but either way, you're losing money on a deal you never should have made. That's a net loss of at least 1,000 septims, potentially 2,000, just for being tidy with your inventory. But the financial hit isn't even the real punishment. It's the inconvenience. Your mid-Dawnguard content, deep in Vampire Lord politics and Soulcairn nightmares, and suddenly you have to pause everything, fast travel to Winterhold, and hope you actually have thousands of gold on hand. If you don't, now you're selling random swords and potions to scrape together enough coin to rebuy something you already owned at a markup. The game gave zero indication that a DLC released after the base game would need this scroll. Zero. There's no warning. No, hey, you might want to hold on to this. No tooltip. Nothing. Skyrim spent 100 hours teaching you to liquidate anything you don't need, and then it punished you for listening. Nobody lost their save over this. Nobody rage quit. But every single player who sold that scroll felt the exact same thing when Dawnguard asked for it back. A slow, quiet frustration aimed directly at their own past self. And honestly, that might be the most Skyrim emotion there is. But if you think a minor inventory inconvenience is the worst thing Markarth has to offer, wait until you hear about the cannibal cult hiding underneath the city, siding with the cannibals. Let me be honest with you. This is one of those quests where the game actively dares you to be a terrible person and then punishes you for taking the bait. The taste of death starts innocently enough. You're poking around the Hall of the Dead in Markarth when a woman named Iola approaches you with a proposition. She worships Namira, the Daedric Prince of Decay, and she needs your help with something. That something. Luring Brother Verilus, a priest of Arche, to the shrine of Namira under completely false pretenses. You convince this innocent man to follow you into a cave where a group of cannibals is waiting, and then the game asks you to murder him and eat his corpse during a full cannibalistic feast. Here's where it gets complicated. A lot of players committed to this. They figured crossing a line this extreme had to come with some kind of massive payoff, a secret quest line, unique dialogue, some hidden Daedric reward that justified the absolute horror of what they just did. But no, the reward for participating in ritual cannibalism is the Ring of Namira, and the Ring of Namira grants you the ability to feed on dead human bodies for 50 bonus stamina and health regeneration that lasts 5 minutes. 5 minutes. For eating people. That's it. That's what you sold your soul for. A temporary stat buff that you could replicate with a decent potion. The ring isn't game-changing. It isn't even particularly good compared to other Daedric artifacts. It's a novelty item with a horrifying entry cost. But the real punishment isn't the mediocre ring. It's everything after. Multiple NPCs in Markarth become aware of what you did. Merchants and citizens make references to your participation in the cannibal cult for the rest of your playthrough. You don't just carry the guilt, you carry the social consequences people know, and they don't forget. Now, there is a betrayal path. You can turn on Namira's followers during the feast, save Verilus, and walk out with a clean conscience. He'll even thank you with a leveled amount of gold and an amulet of Arche for your trouble. But let's be real. A handful of coins and a basic amulet versus an entire Daedric artifact? The game still punishes you for doing the right thing, just less obviously. You get pocket change while the cannibal path gets a unique ring. Morality in Skyrim pays like a part-time job. The crushing reality is that Skyrim offers zero hidden payoff for crossing this particular moral line. No secret ending, no special recognition, just persistent NPC side-eye, and a ring that isn't worth the inventory slot. Players who expected the game to reward transgression with something meaningful got the exact opposite. A mediocre piece of jewelry and an entire city that looks at you like you're a monster because you are. But if siding with the cannibals sounds bad, wait until you hear about the quest that asks you to personally sacrifice your best friend to a Daedric prince. Sacrificing a follower to Boethia. This one hurts differently than the others on this list. Not because the quest is hard, not because the reward is bad, but because the game makes you do something genuinely awful to someone who trusted you. And then it tells you it didn't even matter. Here's how it works. Boethia's calling triggers once you hit level 30 and find a book called Boethia's Proving. The quest sends you to the Cecellum of Boethia, where a priestess explains what the Daedric prince requires. You need to bring a follower to the Pillar of Sacrifice, someone who has traveled with you, fought beside you, and trusts you completely, and then you need to kill them. The mechanics are deliberately cruel. You tell your companion to interact with the pillar. They walk up to it, no questions asked, because they trust you. Then they become magically immobilized, trapped, unable to fight back, and the game waits. It doesn't do it for you. You have to draw your weapon and execute them yourself. Whatever follower you brought was a choice. Maybe it was Lydia, because she was convenient. Maybe it was someone you actually liked. Either way, they followed you into a place they'd never been, touched something you told them to touch, and died because you decided a Daedric prince's approval was worth more than their life. After the murder, Boethia possesses your follower's corpse and commands the surrounding cultists to fight to the death. You survive, prove yourself worthy, and then Boethia sends you to Knife Point Ridge to kill her previous champion. You fight through the bandit camp, put down her former chosen, and loot the ebony mail from their corpse. A genuinely powerful heavy armor piece with a unique poison cloak enchantment. Solid reward, worth keeping, but here's where it gets dark. You murdered someone who trusted you for a Daedric prince who cycles through champions like they're disposable. The guy you just killed at Knife Point Ridge, he was you. He did the same thing. Sacrificed someone, proved himself, got the armor, and then Boethia moved on the second someone newer came along. That's your future. And the worst part? There's an alternative path path most players never discover. You can complete the quest by killing the cultists already at the Cicellum without ever sacrificing a follower. Same progression, same ebony mail at the end. The cost of getting it through murder was entirely optional. But if you think sacrificing a stranger to an indifferent god is bad, wait until another Daedric prince asks you to murder the one person actively trying to save an entire town from eternal nightmares. Killing Erandur. Erandur is one of the most genuinely good people in all of Skyrim, and most players murdered him without a second thought. Here's the setup. The quest-waking nightmare takes you to Nightcaller Temple outside Dawnstar, where the entire town has been suffering from horrific nightmares caused by the Skull of Corruption, a Daedric artifact belonging to Vermina. Erandur, a Dunmer priest of Mara, volunteers to help you fight through the temple and destroy the skull at its source. He's calm, he's helpful, and he genuinely wants to save people. But here's where it gets complicated. Erandur wasn't always a priest of Mara. He used to be a priest of Vermina. He was part of the very cult that brought the Skull of Corruption to Dawnstar in the first place. He participated in rituals, served a Daedric prince of nightmares, and was complicit in everything that cult did. At some point, he defected. He walked away from Vermina's service, devoted himself to Mara, and spent years, actual years, atoning for what he'd done. And then, right at the moment he's about to destroy the skull and complete his redemption, Vermina herself appears in your head and tells you to kill him, take the staff, claim the power. The temptation isn't random either. The Skull of Corruption deals 20 points of damage on its own, but if you collect dreams from sleeping people, it powers up to 50 points of damage. That's a genuinely powerful weapon, especially early in the game. So there's a real mechanical reason to betray this man. But here's the kicker. If you spare Erandur and let him destroy the skull, he becomes a permanent follower. He's a competent mage companion with unique dialogue and one of the more interesting backstories of any recruitable character in the game. Players who killed him traded a redeemed man with a fascinating history for a staff that requires you to creep around stealing dreams from sleeping people just to keep it charged. The philosophical question Skyrim accidentally asks here is one it rarely has the depth to pose. Does genuine repentance earn forgiveness, or do past atrocities define someone permanently? The community is still split on this. Some players argue that Erandur's history with Vermina's cult means he deserved death, regardless of how much he changed. Others point out that killing a man in the middle of his final act of atonement is about as morally bankrupt as it gets, and the regret almost always hits later. You swing the Skull of Corruption a few times, realize you need to absorb dreams from sleeping people to keep it at full power, and suddenly you're standing there thinking about the companion you could have had instead. But if you think betraying one reformed priest is bad, wait until you hear about the time Serana offers to turn you into a vampire, and you actually say yes. Becoming a vampire in the Soul Cairn. The Dawnguard DLC presents you with what looks like a straightforward choice. To enter the Soul Cairn, Serana offers to partially soul trap you, which lets you pass through the barrier. Simple enough, but there's a catch. That soul trapping slaps you with a debuff called Weakened Soul that drains 45 points from your health, magicka, and stamina the entire time you're inside. And for a realm filled with hostile spirits, bone men, and a dragon named Durnavir, losing 45 points across all three stats is brutal. So naturally, players panic. They see the debuff, they see Serana standing right there, and they remember she's a vampire lord who can turn them. The logic seems obvious. Why get soul trapped when you can just become a vampire and waltz right in? Here's the problem. Becoming a vampire doesn't remove the weakened soul debuff. It doesn't counteract it. It doesn't interact with it at all. You've just added vampirism on top of the existing problem. Now you're dealing with reduced stats and sunlight penalties, NPC hostility if you forget to feed, and the constant micromanagement of a condition you never needed in the first place. You solved nothing. You made everything worse, and the real kicker? There's an actual fix waiting for you inside the Soul Cairn itself. Valerica, Serana's mother, can point you toward a soul gem hidden in a chest beneath one of the master crystals. Grab it, and the weakened soul condition disappears completely. No vampirism required, no debuff, no consequences. Just a clean fix that the game barely tells you exists. That's the core of the frustration. Most players never find this solution on their first playthrough because the game does an absolutely terrible job communicating that it's even an option. There's no quest marker pointing to it, no dialogue prompt that screams, hey, maybe don't become an undead creature of the night over this. So thousands of players voluntarily contracted vampirism, spent hours dealing with the feeding mechanics and sun damage, then had to track down Phalion and Morthal or rejoin the companions just to cure themselves, all to solve solve a problem that had a simple answer sitting in a chest. It's the perfect example of a fix that breaks more than it repairs. You see a problem, you grab the first solution that presents itself, and you end up juggling two conditions instead of one. At least vampirism is curable, though. The next entry on this list involves a permanent loss that no amount of backtracking can undo. Killing Barbas for the Rueful Axe. The Rueful Axe is the most successful bait item in Skyrim history, and I can prove it. Here's the setup. The Daedric Quest. A Daedra's best friend has you meet Barbas, a talking dog who is actually the companion of the Daedric prince Clavicus Vile. Barbas has been separated from his master, and he needs your help getting back. So you agree, because he's a dog, and you're not a monster. You travel together through an entire dungeon, fight enemies side by side, and by the time you reach Clavicus Vile, you've spent a solid chunk of time with this mutt following you around. Then Clavicus Vile gives you the choice. Return Barbas to him and receive the mask of Clavicus Vile, or use the Rueful Axe to kill Barbas right there and keep the weapon for yourself. The axe sounds incredible. It's a Daedric weapon. It has a name. It looks imposing. Every instinct tells you that the cool named axe must be the better reward. It's not. It's not even close. The Rueful Axe deals a measly 20 points of stamina damage. That's it. That's the big enchantment. By the time most players reach this quest, they're already carrying weapons that outperform it in every category. Meanwhile, the Mask of Clavicus Vile reduces vendor prices by 20%, adds 10 points to Speechcraft, and increases magicka regeneration by 5%. It's useful for literally every build in the game. The axe is useful for nobody. But here's where it gets really painful. Killing Barbas permanently disqualifies you from the Oblivion Walker achievement. This is the achievement that requires you to collect every Daedric artifact in the game, and it's already one of the hardest achievements to complete because of how many quests you need to finish correctly. The Rueful Axe does not count as a Daedric artifact. Let me repeat that. You kill the dog, you get a worse weapon, and the game doesn't even give you credit for completing a Daedric quest. You lose twice with a single swing. The manipulation is honestly brilliant in the worst way possible. Clavicus Vile is literally the Daedric prince of bargains and trickery, and the quest is designed so that he tricks you, the player, into making a terrible deal. You trade a companion you've bonded with for an axe that belongs in a display case at best, and countless completionists have reported having to restart their entire achievement run because of this one decision, made in a split second at the end of a quest that deliberately set them up to fail. Clavicus Vile got exactly what he wanted, and you helped him do it. But if choosing the wrong Daedric artifacts sting, wait until you pick the wrong side of an entire civil war. Joining the Stormcloaks. Ulfric Stormcloak is one of the most compelling characters in Skyrim. He's charismatic, passionate, and fighting for something that sounds genuinely noble: freedom for the Nord people. He watched his homeland get sold out by a dying empire that banned the worship of Talos just to appease a group of elven supremacists. When you stand in the palace of the kings and hear him speak, it's hard not to want to pick up a sword and fight for Skyrim's independence. And that's exactly the problem, because the Stormcloaks are a trap, not a gameplay trap, a geopolitical one. And by the time most players figure that out, they've already won the Civil War and handed the actual enemy everything they wanted on a silver platter. Here's the thing. The moment you join the Stormcloaks, every Imperial camp and fort in Skyrim becomes immediately hostile. That means lost fast travel points, lost shelter, and lost access to Imperial merchants and resources for the rest of your playthrough. That alone is annoying, but the real damage isn't mechanical. It's buried in the lore. The Thalmor, Skyrim's actual long-term existential threat, don't just tolerate the Civil War, they actively benefit from it. A weakened empire is an empire that can't resist the Aldmeri Dominion's next move. The Civil War bleeds both sides dry while the Thalmor sit back and watch, spending zero resources to achieve their strategic objectives. The Stormcloak Rebellion isn't a problem for the Thalmor, it's a gift. And Ulfric, the game's own dossiers found inside the Thalmor embassy during the main quest, classify him as an asset, not an ally, an asset. Someone whose actions, whether he knows it or not, serve Thalmor interests. Players walk into the embassy, read that document, and suddenly the entire Civil War looks different. The Stormcloak ending feels satisfying in the moment. Skyrim is free. The Empire is driven out. Ulfric sits on the throne, but zoom out even slightly and the picture is devastating. An independent Skyrim, exhausted from civil war, with no Imperial military support, standing alone against the most powerful magical empire on the continent. That's not a victory. That's a death sentence with extra steps. The regret here is almost entirely narrative, but it hits harder than most mechanical punishments ever could. Players thought they were fighting for freedom and Nordic identity. The lore reveals reveals they were probably functioning as unpaid agents of Aldmeri Dominion grand strategy. That delayed realization, that slow understanding that you were manipulated by a faction's surface-level appeal, is why experienced players overwhelmingly choose the Imperial Legion on subsequent playthroughs. You didn't liberate Skyrim, you isolated it, and somewhere in the Somerset Isles, the Thalmor are smiling. But if siding with the wrong faction stings, wait until you hear about the players who destroyed an entire quest line because they thought they were being heroic. Destroying the Dark Brotherhood. 3,000 gold. That's what the game gives you for making one of the most catastrophic decisions in all of Skyrim. And the worst part? You'll feel like a hero when you do it. Here's how it happens. During with friends like these, you wake up in an abandoned shack with 3 hooded prisoners and Astrid standing behind you. She tells you someone in the room has a contract on their head, and you need to kill one of them to leave. The quest is deliberately structured to make you feel trapped, forced into committing murder for a faction you never asked to join. So naturally, a lot of players do what feels right. They turn around and kill Astrid instead. And honestly, it feels amazing. You just refused to play a murderer's game. You stood up against a secret assassination cult. You're the Dragonborn. Nobody tells you who to kill. But here's where the trap closes. The game rewards your moral stand by directing you to Commander Marrow of the Penitus Oculatus, who congratulates you and hands you 3,000 gold to go wipe out the rest of the Brotherhood. You clear the sanctuary, kill every assassin inside, collect your reward, and that's it. Quest complete. The Dark Brotherhood is destroyed, except you just locked yourself out of one of the best quest lines in the entire game. Permanently? Let me break down what that 3,000 gold actually cost you. You lose the entire Dark Brotherhood quest line, which includes some of the most memorable missions Bethesda has ever designed. You lose Shadowmere, one of the best horses in the game, a mount with a massive health pool that regenerates and respawns after 10 days even if killed. You lose the ability to summon a spectral assassin. You lose the ancient shrouded armor set. You lose Muri as both a follower and a marriage candidate. And you lose access to Radiant assassination contracts that can easily net you over 0.000 septums over the course of a playthrough. 3,000 gold. For content worth tens of thousands of septums and dozens of hours of gameplay. And here's what pushes this decision into the upper tier of worst choices in Skyrim. It's irreversible. Completely, permanently irreversible. Most mistakes in this game can be walked back somehow. You can cure vampirism, you can switch allegiances, you can reload and try again. But once you complete, destroy the Dark Brotherhood, that door closes and never reopens. There is no second chance. The Brotherhood is gone, and every piece of content attached to it vanishes with it. Players who make this choice on their first playthrough almost universally report it as one of their biggest regrets across any Bethesda game. The community consensus is essentially unanimous. The math doesn't work, the morality doesn't pay, and the game practically designed the quest to punish you for doing the right thing. But if destroying an entire faction for pocket change sounds bad, wait until you hear about the decision that turned the entire Skyrim community against itself for over a decade, killing Paarthurnax. This is the one. The decision that haunts more Skyrim players than every other entry on this list combined. Near the end of the main questline, after Paarthurnax has served as the leader of the Greybeards, taught you the way of the voice, helped you understand the Thu'um, and personally guided you through the entire Alduin conflict, Delphine and Esbern walk up and deliver an ultimatum. Kill Paarthurnax. No negotiation. No alternative. Kill the dragon who just helped you save the world, or the blades cut you off entirely. And here's the thing. The reward for obeying them is genuinely insulting. You permanently lose the ability to change your shout meditation bonus from Paarthurnax. Whatever you had selected before, that's locked in forever. In exchange, you get blade support for dragon hunting radiant quests and Esbern's potion, a permanent buff against dragon damage. That's it. Radiant quests you don't need, and a potion that solves a problem most players have already outgrown by the time they reach this point in the story. The trade is so lopsided it almost feels like the game is daring you to say no, but the real cost goes way deeper than mechanics. Kill Paarthurnax and the Greybeards essentially disown you. They refuse to help you, refuse to locate words of power, and treat you with open contempt. And because of that, you permanently lose the ability to broker the Civil War Peace Summit in Season Unending, a quest that literally requires the Greybeards' cooperation at High Hrothgar as neutral ground. One decision, and an entire diplomatic questline vanishes. It gets worse. Players who kill Paarthurnax also lose a specific epilogue sequence where he explains his plan to spread the way of the voice among other dragons, teaching them restraint and coexistence as a path toward lasting peace. That single scene reframes his entire arc. Without it, you're not just killing a dragon, you're erasing a future that Skyrim never gets to have. And the institution demanding this? The Blades. Two people hiding in a cave, clinging to an ancient grudge, asking you to execute the one dragon who chose to betray his own kind and spend thousands of years meditating on a mountain to prove he had changed. The faction making the demand is one of the weakest in the entire game. The target is one of the most compelling characters Bethesda ever wrote. The community response tells you everything you need to know. The Paarthurnax Dilemma mod, which allows players to convince the Blades to spare him, became one of the most downloaded Skyrim mods in history. Millions of players independently looked at this choice, said no, and rewrote the game themselves. When a modding community that large agrees that a decision needs to be undone, that's not a difference of opinion. That's a verdict. Paarthurnax's death might be Skyrim's one genuinely unfixable emotional mistake. The kind of decision that sits with you long after you close the game, long after you start a new character, long after you tell yourself it doesn't matter because it's just a video game. Unless, of course, you count on the modding community to fix it for you. Skyrim accidentally became a psychological experiment about loyalty. Every faction follows the same pattern. Join as a nobody, discover the leader's fatal secret, watch them die, inherit everything. Yet somehow 8 different groups made this formula work. That's why today I'm breaking down every single major faction in Skyrim, what they actually do, what happens if you join them versus ignore them completely, and the dark secrets that get people killed. Starting with the warriors who made a deal with a Daedric prince and can't escape it. The companions. The companions are either Skyrim's most honorable warriors or its most cursed, depending on whether you ask them or their dead victims. Based in Jorrvaskr, the oldest building in Whiterun, they're mercenaries taking contracts for gold and glory. No formal leader, no political allegiances, just steel and coin. Sounds simple, but here's where it gets complicated. The Inner Circle, called the Circle, are all werewolves, and I can prove it. Centuries ago, Harbinger Terfig made a pact with the Glenmoril witches for the beast blood from Hircine, the Daedric prince of the Hunt. The Circle thought it was temporary power. They were wrong. Upon death, every werewolf's soul belongs to Hircine forever in his hunting grounds. 0 exceptions. That means every companion who carries lycanthropy can never reach Sovngarde. Their Nordic afterlife is gone. Current Harbinger Kodlak. Whitemane knows this. His journal contains prophetic dreams about curing the beast blood before he dies. He's desperate, and he should be, because during the Quest Blood's honor, the Silver Hand assassinates him while you're away on a mission. You return to find his corpse. The man who wanted salvation more than anyone dies, cursed. If you complete the companion's questline before finishing the main story, Kodlak's cured spirit actually appears in Sovngarde during the finale, proving the cure worked posthumously. The questline forces you to become a werewolf. Mandatory, Alla the Huntress makes you drink her blood. You lose the well-rested sleep bonus permanently, unless you cure yourself later at Ysgramor's tomb using witch heads from the Glenmoril Coven. 5 witches, total. 1 cures Kodlak's spirit, 1 for yourself, 1 each for twin brothers Vilkas and Farkas. The 5th goes unused because Alla refuses the cure. She embraces the beast. But if you think warriors cursed by a divine contract is dark, wait until you hear about the mages who accidentally created a sentient orb of pure magical energy that can't be turned off. The College of Winterhold. The College of Winterhold is where forbidden knowledge has a body count, a fortress perched on a crumbling cliff on Skyrim's northeast coast. It's the only institution for magical study in the province. The city blames the college for the great collapse of 4E122, when a catastrophic storm destroyed most of Winterhold. The college blames the Red Mountain eruption. Nobody has evidence for either theory, but the mutual hatred is real. Here's the thing. You need exactly 0 magical ability to become Archmage. Feralda at the Bridge Gate asks you to cast a random spell to enter. If you don't know it, she sells it for 30 gold. A pure warrior in full plate armor can lead the mages. This is both hilarious and a common criticism players have had for over a decade. The college's dark secret isn't just one thing, it's 3. First, Archmage Savos Aran led 5 friends into Labyrinthian as a student decades ago. They all died. He buried this trauma and never spoke of it. Second, a former student named the Augur of Dunlane experimented with magic until he transformed himself into a disembodied ball of energy trapped in the midden beneath the college. He's literally a sentient orb that can't die, can't leave, and receives the same unskippable dialogue treatment as Daedric princes. Third, Thalmor agent Ancano lurks inside the college as an advisor, secretly spying and seeking power. The questline revolves around the Eye of Magnus, an artifact so dangerous that reality itself breaks when it activates. You discover it buried under Sarthal during excavation. Ancano seizes control of it, causes a massive explosion that kills Savos Aran, and becomes the final boss. But here's where it gets weird. When you defeat Ancano, the Psijic Order teleports into the college, declares the world is not ready for the Eye, and removes it from Tamriel entirely. The oldest and most powerful mages in existence had to personally intervene. Mirabelle Irvine, the backbone of the college, college and its master wizard dies off-screen while you're exploring Labyrinthian. Her body is never found. The game just tells you she's dead when you return. 2 leaders dead, 1 artifact too dangerous to exist, and you become Archmage, having cast maybe 6 spells total. Tolfdir's first lesson on wards foreshadows everything. He teaches you a basic ward spell in the courtyard. Later, when Ancano uses a paralysis attack during the final battle, that exact ward blocks it. The absent-minded professor accidentally taught you the only defense that matters. But the college has nothing on the faction whose leader spent 25 years embezzling from his own guild while holding a Daedric artifact that makes him nearly unstoppable. The Thieves Guild. The Thieves Guild operates from the Ragged Flagon, a tavern in the Ratway sewers beneath Riften. Professional thieves with a code, no killing while thieving unless pre-authorized, no robbing each other, no robbing the poor. But the guild has been in decline for decades, and nobody knows why. Jobs fail, members die, luck runs out. The answer is betrayal. Guildmaster Mercer Fry secretly murdered the previous guildmaster, Gallus Desidenius, 25 years ago. He framed Gallus's lover, Carlia, for the crime, stole the skeleton key from the Twilight Sepulchre, and has been embezzling from the guild vault ever since. The skeleton key isn't just an unbreakable lockpick. It unlocks your potential, granting superhuman abilities. Mercer uses it to become nearly invincible. But here's the real problem. The skeleton key belongs to Nocturnal, Daedric Prince of Night and Darkness. Its theft severed the guild's covenant with her. That supernatural luck that separated professional thieves from common bandits disappeared the moment Mercer took it. The guild has been dying for 25 years because their own leader destroyed them. The betrayal reveal happens at Snowvale Sanctum. You're working with Mercer to track down Carlia. You find her. She tries to warn you. Mercer stabs you in the back and leaves you to die. One of the biggest betrayal moments in the game. Carlia saves you with a paralysis antidote and produces Gallus's journal, written in Falmer language, proving Mercer's guilt. The questline transforms you into a Nightingale, Nocturnal's elite agents, who serve her even in death as ghostly sentinels. You infiltrate Mercer's house and discover he emptied the entire guild vault. You track him to the Dwemer ruin Erkenthan, where he's stealing the eyes of the Falmer, 2 massive gems worth a fortune. You kill him, you recover the skeleton key, and then the game asks you to return it. Many players refuse. The skeleton key functions as an unbreakable lockpick while you hold it. Infinite lockpicking with 0 risk. The quest Darkness Returns sits in your journal forever. Returning it unlocks Nightingale powers and restores the guild's luck, but you lose the key. It's a genuine trade-off. The restoration system requires radiant jobs. Complete 5 jobs in a specific hold. Unlock a special reputation quest for that city. 4 total across Whiterun, Windhelm, Markarth, and Solitude. Each completion adds merchants to the Ragged Flagon, improves the cistern visually, and increases fence gold capacity. Full restoration makes you Guildmaster. Maven Blackbriar serves as the guild's patron, controlling Riften through corruption. She's connected to the Thieves Guild, the Dark Brotherhood, and the Thalmor. If the Imperials win the Civil War, she becomes Jarl. Her influence is permanent, regardless of outcome. There's no option to destroy the Thieves Guild. All key members are marked essential. But if you think a leader who betrayed everyone is dark, wait until you hear about the assassins whose leader performs the Black Sacrament on her own burned body and begs you to kill her. The Dark Brotherhood. The Dark Brotherhood worships Sithis, the Void itself, and is led spiritually by the Night Mother, a preserved corpse believed to be Sithis' mortal wife, who murdered her own children as offerings. By 4E201, the Brotherhood is nearly extinct. Sanctuaries across Tamriel have fallen. Only the Falkreath Sanctuary survives, led by Astrid, a Nord who abandoned the traditional 5 tenets and the old ways. The questline begins when you kill Grelad the Kind for a child named Aventus Aretino performing the Black Sacrament. Astrid kidnaps you, brings you to an abandoned shack, and tells you to kill one of 3 hostages to join. You choose, you kill, you enter the sanctuary. The door riddle asks, what is the music of life? The answer is silence. My brother. Everything seems normal until you hide inside the Night Mother's coffin during whispers in the dark. She speaks to you telepathically. She names you Listener, the position that receives contracts directly from Sithis through her corpse. Astrid is furious. She wanted that title. She built this sanctuary. You're the outsider. The main contract comes from Amaund Modieri, an Elder Council member. The target, Emperor Titus Mede II. You assassinate Vittoria Vici at her wedding in Solitude. You can drop a gargoyle on her. You kill Gaius Maro and plant evidence. You pursue the mad jester Cicero to Dawnstar Sanctuary and choose whether to spare or kill him. You steal the identity of the gourmet, an orc chef named Balagog Gro Nolob. You impersonate him at the Emperor's castle. You poison his meal with Jaren root, the deadliest poison ingredient in the game. Only one plant exists in Skyrim. The Emperor dies, but it's a decoy. Commander Maro reveals Astrid betrayed the Brotherhood to the Penitus Oculatus. You return to find the sanctuary burning. Nazir and Babette, a 300-year-old vampire child, survive. Astrid performed the Black Sacrament on herself. She used her own burned body as the effigy. She's lying in a pool of blood, surrounded by candles, and begs you to kill her with the Blade of Woe as her contract. One of the most dramatically powerful moments in the entire game. You board the Emperor's ship, the Cateria. You find the real Emperor Titus Mede II. He's not hostile. He expected you. His speech is legendary. And once more, I prove Commander Marrow the fool. You and I have a date with destiny. But so it is with assassins and emperors. He asks, as a dying wish, that you kill Modieri for betraying him. You collect 20,000 gold. You can restore the Dawnstar Sanctuary for 19,000 gold with full upgrades, including a torture chamber. There's an alternative. Kill Astrid in the abandoned shack instead of a hostage. Report to guards. Assault the Falkreath Sanctuary and kill everyone. Reward 3,000 gold. You lose Shadowmere, the demonic horse. You lose 20,000 gold. You lose the spectral assassin power that summons Lucian Lechance's ghost from Oblivion. You lose Windseer, a unique scimitar on the Cateria with 100% stagger chance on every bash. Cicero is the standout character. His 5 journals chronicle 8 years of isolation as the Brotherhood collapsed around him, documenting his descent from disciplined assassin into madness. If you spare him, he becomes a follower. Lucian Lechance's spectral form, if summoned during the quest, advises against killing Cicero. But the Dark Brotherhood's body count has nothing on the faction war where both sides believe they're saving Skyrim while accidentally serving the enemy that wants them both dead. The Imperial Legion. The Imperial Legion operates from Castle Dour in solitude with a single mission: crush the Stormcloak Rebellion and maintain Imperial control over Skyrim. The Empire signed the White Gold Concordat after the Great War, banning Talos worship to end hostilities with the Aldmeri Dominion. This treaty is the root cause of the Civil War. General Tullius leads the Legion. He's a military governor from Cyrodiil, initially dismissive of Nordic culture, but learns respect as the war progresses. He despises the Thalmor. They almost make him want to throw in with the Stormcloaks. He believes the rebellion is a distraction from the real enemy. His second in command is Legate Rika, a Nord officer who fought alongside Ulfric and Galmar in the Great War. They were once friends. Here's the secret nobody talks about. Rika secretly worships Talos despite enforcing the ban. After killing Ulfric in an Imperial victory, she whispers, "Talos be with you," over his corpse. Tullius almost catches it. If the Stormcloaks attack Solitude and she dies, her last words are, "Talos preserve us." The questline starts at Castle Dour. Clear Fort Kragstad of bandits. Swear the Imperial oath. Retrieve the Jagged Crown from Korvanjund, an ancient Nordic ruin. This is the last chance to switch sides. You can deliver the crown to Ulfric instead of Tullius. Deliver Tullius's message to Jarl Balgruuf, who sides with the Empire. Defend Whiterun from the Stormcloak siege in the Battle for Whiterun. Reunification of Skyrim is the umbrella quest, containing multiple fort battles: Fort Dunstad, Fort Greenwall, Fort Castav, Fort Amal. Intelligence operations include a false front and compelling tribute. The questline culminates in the Battle for Windhelm, final assault on Ulfric's stronghold. You storm the Palace of the Kings. Ulfric requests the Dragonborn kill him personally. It will make for a better song. You can execute him, or let Tullius do it. Imperial victory changes 4 Jarls. Brunwulf Freewinter replaces Ulfric in Eastmarch. Brina Marilis replaces Skald in the Pale. Maven Blackbriar replaces Lila in the Rift. Kralder replaces Courier in Winterhold. Deposed Jarls are exiled to Windhelm's Palace of the Kings. The arguments for the Empire focus on unity. Humanity's best chance against the Thalmor requires a united front. The ban was strategic compromise, not genuine belief. Even Rika worships Talos. Ulfric unknowingly serves Thalmor interests by weakening the Empire. Hammerfell barely survived fighting the Thalmor alone after the Empire abandoned the province. But here's where it gets complicated. The Thalmor dossier on Ulfric, found in the Thalmor embassy during diplomatic immunity, reveals Ulfric's status as an asset, uncooperative, dormant. The Thalmor want the war to continue indefinitely. They consider both an Imperial victory and a Stormcloak victory undesirable. The ideal scenario for the Thalmor is a forever war that bleeds both sides. Ulfric doesn't know he was manipulated. The game never lets you show him the dossier. The Imperial Legion believes they're saving Skyrim from itself, but the Stormcloaks believe they're saving Skyrim from foreign control. The Stormcloaks operate from the Palace of the Kings in Windhelm. Their purpose: end Imperial rule, restore Talos worship, establish Skyrim's independence. Led by Ulfric Stormcloak, Jarl of Windhelm, a man who studied with the Greybeards for nearly 10 years before leaving to fight in the Great War. The rebellion's origin is the Markarth incident. During the Great War, Reachman seized Markarth. After the war ended, Ulfric retook the city using the Thuum with a promise of free Talos worship in return. The Thalmor discovered the agreement and demanded enforcement of the Concordat. The Empire arrested Ulfric. This incident birthed both the Stormcloak Rebellion and the Forsworn insurgency. Ulfric challenged High King Torrig to a duel. He shouted Torrig to the ground with the Thuum and killed him with his sword. Imperials call it murder. Stormcloaks call it legitimate Nordic tradition. The entire Civil War hinges on whether using the voice in single combat is honorable or a war crime. His general is Galmar Stone Fist, who fought alongside Ulfric and Rika in the Great War. If Rika dies in battle, Galmar says sadly, always was a stubborn woman. His brother Rolf Stone Fist harasses Dunmer refugees in Windhelm streets, calling them greyskins, and worse. Here's the racial problem nobody talks about. Dunmer refugees are confined to the Grey Quarter slum. Argonians are banned from living inside the city by Ulfric's decree. The in-game book Scourge of the Grey Quarter is openly racist propaganda. When confronted about Grey Quarter conditions, Ulfric dismisses it. Blasted Dark Elves. The Stormcloaks fight for freedom, but not everyone's freedom. The questline mirrors the Imperial path. Kill an ice wraith near Serpentstone Isle, swear the Stormcloak oath. Retrieve the jagged crown from Corvinjund. Deliver Ulfric's axe to Balgruf. Returning the axe is a declaration of war. Assault and capture Whiterun in the battle for Whiterun. Complete liberation of Skyrim with multiple fort battles. Fort Newgrad, Fort Sungard, Fort Snowhawk, Fort Hregstad. The final assault is the Battle for Solitude. Rikka fights to the death defending the city. Tullius surrenders. Elisif the Fair is coerced into supporting the Stormcloaks but stays as Jarl of Solitude. She's the only Jarl never replaced regardless of outcome. Stormcloak victory changes 4 Jarls. Vignar Greymane replaces Balgruf in Whiterun. Thongvor Silverblood replaces Igmund in the Reach. Dengir of Stoon replaces Sidgeir in Falkreath. Sorley the Builder replaces Idgrod Ravencrone in Hjalmarch. The arguments for the Stormcloaks focus on self-determination. Religious freedom is fundamental. The Empire is too weak to protect citizens from Thalmor abductions. The Justiciars drag people from their homes for worshipping Talos. Hammerfell proved independence is viable after they drove the Thalmor out alone. Nords have the right to govern themselves, but the Thalmor dossier reveals the uncomfortable truth. Ulfric was captured during the Great War and psychologically manipulated. He gave up information under torture that led to the fall of the Imperial city. He doesn't know this. The Thalmor consider him an asset, uncooperative but useful. They want the war to continue forever. Every Stormcloak who dies bleeding the Empire is a victory for the Dominion. The Civil War questline had massive cut content, dynamic campaigns, counterattacks, recruiting a giant named Goldar, magic-using troops, city battles for every hold, the ability to lose battles. The system uses 72 quests in the creation kit, making it probably the most complex quest group in the game. Most was cut due to engine limitations, but if you think a civil war manipulated by foreign agents is complicated, wait until you hear about the DLC faction war where both paths end with you killing the same Vampire King. The Dawnguard versus Volkihar Vampires. The Dawnguard DLC presents a single branching questline centered on the tyranny of the Sun Prophecy. Lord Harkon's plan, permanently blot out the sun using Oriel's bow dipped in the blood of a daughter of Coldharbour. The twist? The prophecy was fabricated by Archcurate Verther, a bitter snow elf vampire seeking revenge against his own god, Ariel. The entire DLC plot exists because of one embittered priest's grudge. At level 10 or higher, guards mention vampire hunters reforming near Riften, or an orc named Durak approaches directly. You travel to Fort Dawnguard, investigate Dimhollow Crypt, discover Serana sealed in a sarcophagus with an Elder Scroll. You escort her to Castle Volkihar. Lord Harkon offers his blood. Accepting joins the vampires. Refusing joins the Dawnguard. This choice is permanent. Fort Dawnguard was originally built to imprison a Jarl's vampiric son. Isran, a former vigilant of Stendar, reformed the order after vampires destroyed the Hall of the Vigilance. Key recruits include engineer Soreen Gerard, who develops crossbow technology, beast tamer Gunmar, who trains armored trolls for 500 gold, and priest Florentius Baenius, who claims to speak directly with Arche. Dawnguard rewards include crossbows as a new weapon type with dwarven variants and exploding bolts, sun spells like Sunfire and Vampire's Bane, and the final quest storming Castle Volkihar with the full Dawnguard force. Castle Volkihar is led by Lord Harkon, who sacrificed thousands of innocents to Molag Bal for vampirism. For women, becoming a daughter of Coldharbour required a degrading ritual with Molag Bal, strongly implied to involve sexual assault. This detail gives weight to Serana's trauma. The Vampire Lord transformation is the signature reward, a bat-like monstrous form with 11 perks. Key abilities include Vampiric Grip, telekinetically grabbing and choking enemies, Mist Form for invulnerability, and supernatural reflexes to slow time. The Bloodstone Chalice quest reveals internal court treachery. The second half is identical on both paths, chasing echoes, beyond death, unseen visions, touching the sky, kindred judgment. Both visit the Soul Cairn where Valerica hid with an Elder Scroll. Both visit the Forgotten Vale. Both end with killing Harkon. Even as his loyal vampire, you betray him. Serana sides with the player regardless of faction. You can obtain Vampire Lord form on either path by asking Serana later. Serana was sealed in Dimhollow Crypt during the First Era. She slept for thousands of years. She's curious about the changed world. Surprised there's an empire based in Cyrodiil. She's essential. Levels with the player gaining new spells, and has unique AI behaviors like sitting in chairs and commenting on weather. Widely considered Skyrim's best companion. She cannot be married. If you wear an Amulet of Mara, she refuses, saying temples frighten her due to her Molag Bal trauma. The Forgotten Vale reveals the tragic true history of the Falmer. The Snow Elves were elegant, golden-skinned elves who fled the Atmaran genocide by seeking Dwemer protection. The Dwemer forced them to eat a toxic blinding fungus, transforming them into the twisted modern Falmer. Knight Paladin Gelibor is possibly the last uncorrupted Snow Elf alive, having guarded the Wayshrines for millennia. He calls the modern Falmer the Betrayed. Durnevir is a dragon trapped in the Soul Cairn after making a deal with the ideal masters to guard Valerica until her death, but she's immortal. Teaching his Shout Soul tier, which deals massive damage plus Soul Trap plus Reanimate, makes him one of the most rewarding encounters. Jube, the very first NPC you meet in Morrowind, appears as a confused ghost in the Soul Cairn who doesn't know he's dead. Oriel's bow with sun-hallowed arrows rains burning light from the sky. With blood-cursed arrows created by Serana's blood, it blots out the sun. The same weapon serves either the light or the darkness. But the Dawnguard's faction choice has nothing on the moral dilemma at the heart of Skyrim's main quest, where two ancient orders force you to choose between redemption and revenge. The Blades and the Greybeards. These two factions are inseparable from the main quest and from each other. They represent opposing philosophies, action versus restraint, and they converge on the game's most debated moral choice. The Blades are ancient dragon slayers descended from the Akaviri Dragon Guard. Fierce dragon hunters from Akavir who invaded Tamriel were stopped by Dragonborn Raymond Cyrodiil and swore their lives to him. They evolved into the Emperor's elite espionage service over centuries. During the Great War, the Thalmor specifically targeted and nearly destroyed them. Only two known members survive in Skyrim. Delphine is acting Grandmaster, disguised as an innkeeper at the Sleeping Giant Inn in Riverwood, a high-priority Thalmor target, fiercely pragmatic and militant. Esbern is the lore archivist hiding in Riften's Ratway, terrified of Thalmor agents. He predicted the return of dragons. Together they lead you to Skyhaven Temple in the Reach, a massive fortress sealed by a dragonborn blood seal. Inside is Alduin's Wall, a monumental Akaviri sculptural relief depicting the prophecy of Alduin's defeat using Dragonrend. The player can recruit up to 3 followers to rebuild the blades. Dragonbane is a leveled Akaviri katana dealing 20 to 40 extra damage to dragons. Its level is locked when you first enter Skyhaven Temple, so savvy players wait until level 46 or higher. The Greybeards are an ancient monastic order founded by Jurgen Windcaller after the catastrophic defeat at the Battle of Red Mountain. He spent 7 years meditating on why the Thu'um had failed, concluding the gods punished Nords for arrogant misuse of the voice. He developed the way of the voice. The voice should be used for worship and contemplation, not warfare. Arngir is the only Greybeard who can speak safely to outsiders. The other 3, Bori, Einarth, and Wulfgar, have voices so powerful that speaking to someone would destroy them. When they whisper Dovahkiin at the recognition ceremony, the ground shakes. The tablets along the 7,000 steps from Ivarstead tell the history of the voice. Reading all 10 grants the blessing Voice of the Sky, where animals neither attack nor flee for 24 hours. Ulfric Stormcloak studied with the Greybeards but left before completing training. He never advanced far enough to train with Paarthurnax. Paarthurnax is the secret leader of the Greybeards and the Dragonborn's crucial mentor. An ancient dragon, likely born during the Dawn era, he was once Alduin's chief lieutenant who committed unspeakable atrocities. He rebelled against Alduin, taught humanity the Thu'um, and spent millennia in meditation at the throat of the world to overcome his draconic nature. He is the only white dragon in Skyrim, showing signs of extreme age. Voiced by Charles Martinet, the same actor who voiced Mario for over 30 years, completely unrecognizable. His iconic quote, "What is better, to be born good or to overcome your evil nature through great effort?" After Alduin's Bane, Delphine and Esbern discover Paarthurnax is the Greybeards' leader. They refuse all further assistance until the Dragonborn kills him, invoking their oaths. The quest Paarthurnax triggers. If you kill Paarthurnax, you receive a dragon soul. The Blades reopen with dragon hunting quests, recruitment, and Esbern's potions. Arngir's furious. This is how you repay our trust? His noble spirit, the wisdom of ages, all gone, and for what? A mindless vendetta urged on you by a cabal of Akaviri barbarians. He threatens violence. The Greybeards cut you off from Wordwall locations and Paarthurnax's shout meditation bonuses permanently. If you spare Paarthurnax, the quest silently vanishes from the journal. The Blades refuse to speak with you. You lose dragon hunting quests and future Blades benefits. You keep Arngir's Wordwall guidance and Paarthurnax's meditation bonuses. If Paarthurnax is alive after Alduin's defeat, he delivers an epilogue speech about teaching the way of the voice to all dragons, then flies away. If he's dead, that future dies with him. Here's why this choice resonates. There is no good option. You lose something either way. The Blades are supposed to serve the Dragonborn, yet they issue ultimatums. Paarthurnax represents redemption through effort. The Blades represent justice for ancient war crimes. His very name means ambition overlord cruelty, and he fights against every letter of it daily. The gameplay heavily favors sparing him, as Greybeard Wordwall guidance far exceeds Blades' radiant quests in value. The Paarthurnax Dilemma mod by Arthmore, allowing players to force Delphine to stand down, became so popular that it was eventually hosted on Bethesda's own Creations platform. The little girl Sissel in Rorikstead dreams of a good dragon who was old and grey but wasn't scary, almost certainly a prophetic vision of Paarthurnax. Skyrim contains 8 major joinable factions with full questlines. The player can become leader of the Companions, College, Thieves Guild, and Dark Brotherhood, all in a single playthrough. The 3 mutually exclusive choices, Imperial versus Stormcloak, Dawnguard versus Volkihar, and the Paarthurnax Dilemma, create the game's most consequential decision points. Every major faction follows the same narrative skeleton. join as outsider, discover a terrible secret, watch the leader die, inherit command. Yet each tells a fundamentally different story about power. The companions ask whether a Daedric gift is worth your soul. The college asks whether knowledge always corrupts. The Thieves Guild asks whether luck is divine or earned. The Dark Brotherhood asks whether obedience or autonomy serves evil better. And the Civil War asks whether freedom or unity saves more lives. These questions have kept players arguing for over 14 years. Skyrim accidentally created one of gaming's most elaborate conspiracy theories through 5 randomly placed jars. 13 years later, we still don't know what they actually mean. That's why today, I'm breaking down every single unsolved lore mystery in Skyrim, starting with the one that drove the community absolutely insane. Bug jars. 5 jars containing living insects are scattered across Skyrim. A bee at Golden Glow Estate, a butterfly at the Alchemist's Shack, a dragonfly in Dushnik Yal's cellar, a moth in Duskglow Crevice, a torchbug at Frostflow Lighthouse. Every single one has mysterious runic inscriptions carved into the inside of the cork lid. The runes don't match any known system. Players tried Elder Futhark, Younger Futhark, Proto-Norse, every runic alphabet that exists. Nothing translates consistently. The insects stay alive indefinitely and always face the same direction no matter how you rotate the jar. The most popular theory claims the 5 locations form a perfect pentagram on Skyrim's map with a shrine of Talos at the center, supposedly evidence of a Thalmor ritual to destroy reality. Players extracted fragments like Gift Horse Lake from the 15 total characters across all 5 lids, but the severe shortage of vowels makes actual translation impossible. In 2017, a Bethesda developer confirmed the jars were part of a scrapped quest cut early in development, except he never explained what the inscriptions actually mean. Game code shows 4 jars numbered sequentially, while the B jar uses completely different naming. The Saints and Seducer's creation added 3 more bug jars years later. Bethesda kept expanding the mystery instead of resolving it. Nobody in 13 years has definitively solved what the inscriptions mean, what the scrapped quest involved, or why Bethesda continues adding more jars through Creation Club content. The mystery persists specifically because the evidence is simultaneously too deliberate to be random and too incomplete to solve. But if you think random jars are disturbing, wait until you hear about the village sacrificing women for crop yields. Rorikstead is a tiny farming village in Skyrim's frozen tundra that produces impossibly abundant harvests. The founder Rorik claims he bought worthless land after the Great War. The village healer Juan Minette gets suspiciously defensive. Soul gems appear in every single house. Juan's quarters contain Spirit of the Daedra, a book about how Daedric princes harvest mortal souls. Only 3 copies exist in Skyrim. He secretly teaches young Sissel magic. What we do? The things I teach you, the others wouldn't understand. He teaches water breathing and candle tricks, not healing spells. Every young Nord woman in Rorikstead is dead. Lemkil's wife died giving birth to twins. Moralki's wife died when Eric was young. Juan couldn't save any of them. Lokir of Rorikstead stammers his hometown's name with genuine fear at Helgen before getting executed. Nobody in Rorikstead acknowledges he existed. But here's where it breaks everything. The book, The Atlas of Dragons, references Rorikstead in 2E 373, thousands of years before the mortal man Rorik was born. The dominant theory is that Juan and Rorik made a bargain with a Daedric prince, trade fertile women for fertile land. Soul gems trap the sacrificed souls. Bethesda likely planned a larger cult quest that got cut, leaving only the environmental storytelling. During Arena, a village called Lanealton occupied this exact location, then vanished completely. The recursive pattern of settlements appearing, disappearing, and reappearing suggests something far older than Rorik Kant. At least Rorikstead's darkness stays in one village, unlike the ghost who revealed Talos was never one person. Old Hroldan. Sleep in Tiber Septim's room at Old Hroldan Inn past 1 a.m. and a ghostly Nord soldier appears. He calls you Hjalti, a name most players have never heard. You don't remember me, Hjalti? He demands a sword oath and mentions the Swordmasters of Alcair, a region in High Rock. Innkeeper Itis only knows Tiber Septim had many names. This quest validates the Arcturian heresy, arguing that Talos is not one person but an oversoul of 3 beings. Hjalti Earlybeard was a Breton youth from Alcair who became Tiber Septim. Ysmir Wolfhearth was an ancient undead Nord king whose storm powers accompanied Hjalti. Zurin Arctus was the imperial battle mage. Through catastrophic events involving the Mantella and Numidium, they merged into Talos. The ghost's mention of Alcair confirms Hjaldi was Breton, not the Nordic hero official history describes. The ghost mistakes the Dragonborn for Hjalti because both carry the same Lorcan-connected divine spark. This undermines both narratives. Stormcloaks claim Talos as pure Nord hero. The Empire claims Talos as singular divine emperor. The Civil War is fought over simplified mythology. Bethesda included this quest as subtle confirmation that the truth is far stranger than either side understands. The heresy describes how at Old Hroldan, Hjaldi went to the gates, and the storm followed above his head, shouting down the walls. This specific reference to storm voice powers explains why the ghost remembers campaigns with someone who could shout, connecting directly to the Dragonborn's Thuum abilities, and creating the case of mistaken identity across thousands of years. But at least Talos' confusion doesn't break the Dark Brotherhood, unlike what happens when a child's prayer reaches nobody. The Black Sacrament. Orphan Aventus Aretino performs the Black Sacrament against his abusive caretaker Grelad the Kind. Except in 4E201, the Dark Brotherhood has no listener. The Night Mother hasn't spoken to anyone in years. Without a listener, Black Sacrament prayers cannot be relayed. Astrid's Falkreath Sanctuary listens for rumors, not divine contracts. When Aventus performs the sacrament, nobody should hear it, yet the Dragonborn ends up at that orphanage anyway. Grelad has exactly 1 HP, mechanically designed to die instantly. No bounty applies for killing her inside the orphanage. The orphans cheer. Runa Fairshield says, "Kill one person, and you can solve so many problems." I wonder at the possibilities. The Dragonborn fulfills a contract they never received, gets a "we know" note with a black handprint, and Astrid kidnaps them as recruitment. The question is whether the Night Mother orchestrated events despite having no listener. She heard Aventus, but couldn't relay it officially. Did she influence circumstances to draw the Dragonborn toward Aventus? The accidental fulfillment leads to Brotherhood membership, which leads to becoming the listener she desperately needed. The scenario also critiques the Brotherhood's decline. A child's prayers going unanswered while an untrained adventurer stumbles into the job demonstrates how thoroughly Astrid's deviation broke the organization. The irony deepens when you realize Astrid's leadership mirrors Grelad's. Both run dysfunctional families that would be better off without them. Aventus performs an entire ritual involving a human heart, nightshade, and a skeletal effigy while chanting to the Night Mother. The precision of his ritual suggests someone taught him, or he found explicit instructions. Nobody questions where a child learned forbidden Dark Brotherhood rites, raising the possibility the Night Mother herself planted the knowledge to engineer the entire sequence. But if the Night Mother orchestrating events is disturbing, wait until you hear she's actually a Daedric prince wearing a corpse. The Night Mother. The Night Mother is either a murdered Dunmer woman or a Daedric prince wearing a corpse. The Night Mother's truth claims she was Dunmer, who killed her 5 children and was murdered by villagers. Fire and Darkness flatly states the Night Mother is Mephala, the Daedric prince of lies and murder. Sacred Witness claims she was a little old lady from the Thieves Guild. The author was found dead with black and white stones over his eyes. In Skyrim, the corpse has human features despite lore calling her Dunmer. Rounded ears, human skin tone. Shooting the coffin with Soul Trap produces purple energy as if striking a living entity. She speaks directly to the Dragonborn during Whispers in the Dark, demonstrating agency corpses lack. The Mephala connection runs deep. In the Whispering Door, Mephala manipulates Jarl Balgruf's son through lies and secrets. The Morag Tong, the Brotherhood's predecessor, explicitly served Mephala. Their Black Hands parallel the Brotherhood's Black Hand organization. In Daggerfall, the Iliac Bay Brotherhood openly worshipped Mephala as Queen of Oblivion. The most elegant theory synthesizes every contradiction. A mortal woman genuinely existed, killed her children, and died. But Mephala now inhabits her corpse as a vessel, controlling the Brotherhood through deception, making the entire organization unwitting servants of a Daedric prince, while believing they serve Sithis. This represents the ultimate expression of Mephala's sphere, a lie so complete even the faithful don't know they're deceived. Bethesda maintains this ambiguity across 5 games because resolving it would undermine an organization built on secrets. Fire and Darkness explicitly states the truth, but players dismiss it because contradictory sources exist, which is exactly how Mephala would want it. But at least the deception stays within one organization, unlike the Ebony Warrior, who wants a death that might be impossible. The Ebony Warrior, at level 80, a warrior in full ebony armor, approaches the Dragonborn. "I have done all that can be done. There is nothing left, except for you." He asks the Dragonborn to send him to Sovngarde with honor, then waits at last vigil for his final battle, except he's a Redguard, a race whose afterlife is the far shore shores, not Sovngarde. He's asking for an afterlife he cannot reach. Looting his body reveals impossible inventory. He carries a human heart and Daedra heart simultaneously. No other humanoid NPC carries both. Combined with his filled Black Soul Gem, his inventory contains exact components for Daedric ritual at the Atronach Forge. He uses dragon shouts despite being neither Dragonborn nor Nord. He stands at 1.21 scale, one of the tallest NPCs. And here's the kicker. If you kill him before visiting Sovngarde, he never appears there. Unlike every other killable NPC with Sovngarde connections, he's just gone. The leading theory connects him to Raymond Ebonarm, a forgotten war god from Daggerfall who wore ebony armor. Others see him as the Hunding, the Redguard make-way god. The Umbra theory notes parallels to Morrowind's warrior possessed by Clavicus Vile's soul-trapping sword. The most meta interpretation reads him as a mirror of the maxed-out player. His dialogue about exhausting all quests is exactly what a level 80 player experiences. His 6 lines of dialogue, 0 backstory, and absent afterlife make him either the game's deepest character study or its most tantalizing loose end. Bethesda gave us a warrior who accomplished everything, wants one thing and cannot have it. Whether he's trapped between identities, possessed by a Daedric artifact, or exists as a mirror of player exhaustion, we'll never know. No journal, no backstory, no name, just an impossible request. But at least his mystery affects one person. Unlike the Eye of Magnus, which could unravel reality and nobody knows what it is. The Eye of Magnus, the enormous glowing orb beneath Sarthal, is never identified by anyone. Tolfdir rules out Dwemer, Falmer, Ayleid, and Daedric origins. The Psijic Order calls it too dangerous, but won't explain why. Ancano taps into it and declares he holds the power to unravel the world. Nobody disputes this. The Synod's Oculary detects only 2 magical signatures across all of Tamriel, the Eye and the Staff of Magnus. The Eye overshadows every other artifact on the continent, including 3 Elder Scrolls. The official game guide describes the Eye as having a similar origin to the Elder Scrolls, fragments of creation beyond time. The Augur of Dunlane says, to see through Magnus's eye without being blinded, you require his staff, implying the staff controls the eye. Khajiit mythology describes how Magrus had his eye torn out by Azura, who made it into the Ether Prism, possibly a literal origin for this artifact. The dominant theory proposes the eye contains Magnus's blueprints for creation itself. Magnus was the architect of Mundus, who fled before completion, tearing a hole through oblivion that became the sun. If he carried schematics for reality, and Ancano's unraveling line is literal, then possessing the blueprints gives power to unmake creation. The Snow Elves may have attacked Sarthal specifically to seize this object, making the Eye the true cause of the Night of Tears. After Ancano's defeat, the Psijic Order takes the Eye to Artaeum without explanation. They never clarify why they're qualified custodians of an artifact that disrupts even their foresight. The college gets 0 say. The Dragonborn isn't consulted. The Psijics decide they're taking the universe-destroying artifact to their secret island that phases in and out of reality, and everyone accepts it. Nobody knows what the Eye is. Nobody knows what the Psijics are doing with it. And the Snow Elves potentially understanding its danger better than Nords raises uncomfortable questions about whether Skyrim's founding myth is built on a lie. But if one artifact is concerning, wait until you hear about the historical event that might justify genocide. Night of Tears. Nordic tradition holds that Snow Elves massacred Sarthal unprovoked. Only Ysgramor and his sons survived, returning with the 500 companions for righteous vengeance. Every Nord child learns this founding myth, except in-game books tell a different story. The Imperial Report on Sarthal reveals Snow Elves demonstrated an intricate understanding of the city's layout before launching their assault. Their attack was a specific directive, and perhaps a singular goal, not random genocide. Night of Tears concludes, the Nords found something buried deep. They attempted to keep it buried, but the elves learned of it and coveted it. The Eye of Magnus is the obvious candidate. This reframes Ysgramor as potentially a war criminal. His response was catastrophically disproportionate. Surviving Snow Elves were brutally bound and burnt alive, or chained and enslaved. Azadal provided magically enhanced weapons for genocide. Survivors who sought Dwemer refuge were enslaved, fed toxic fungi, and transformed into the blind Falmer. Knight Paladin Gelibor represents the only uncorrupted Snow Elf survivor. But here's the provocative counter-theory. What if Snow Elves weren't stealing the Eye, but trying to reseal or destroy it? They understood its apocalyptic potential while Nords remained ignorant. The specific directive wasn't greed, but preventing catastrophe. Ysgramor slaughtered them for it, then built a myth painting his victims as monsters. Jirik Galderson, sealed in Sarthal next to the Eye centuries later, raises questions about who placed him there and whether he's guardian or prisoner. Some someone understood the Eye needed watching. Bethesda deliberately juxtaposes contradictory narratives without resolution. The game provides both heroic Nordic legend and damning Imperial research, forcing players to question whether Skyrim's founding myth is built on a lie, whether snow elves were aggressors or heroes, whether Ysgramor was savior or genocidal conqueror, and if snow elves understood the Eye's danger, who else knew? The Psijic Order's sudden interest in an artifact buried for thousands of years suggests they knew exactly what was in Saarthal long before the college started digging. The Psijic Order, unseen for over a century, suddenly intervenes at the college with suspicious precision. Monk Narian appears in a vision only the Dragonborn can see, warning you have set in motion a chain of events that cannot be stopped. They never contact Archmage Savos Aaron, Tolfdir, or any senior mage. Only the brand new initiate. Quaranir later freezes time, admitting the Eye's energy blocked their visions. He identifies the Thalmor as enemies, but his most revealing statement comes after Ancano's defeat. "We knew you would succeed. Your victory here justifies our belief in you." He then installs the Dragonborn as Archmage, revealing this had been their intent from the start. The entire intervention was calculated to secure the Eye and place a sympathetic leader at the college. The contradictions pile up. They claim not to typically intervene directly while orchestrating elaborate multi-step intervention. They say the future is obscured yet express confident foreknowledge. They take the Eye for safekeeping without explaining qualifications when the artifact disrupts even their powers. Their island Artaeum has vanished twice from physical reality. In ESO Somerset, the Psijic questline involves sealing time breaches and recovering the Staff of Towers, an artifact connected to metaphysical anchors of reality. If the Thalmor's goal is deactivating towers to unmake Mundus, the Psijic's interest in tower-related artifacts suggests cosmic-scale counter-operations. Their Skyrim intervention may be one move in a millennia-long chess game. But here's what nobody talks about. The Psijics knew about the Eye before excavation. Their response was too fast, too precise. Narian appears the moment you touch it, not days later. They were watching Saarthal. They knew what was buried there, and they waited until someone else dug it up, then swooped in once danger was neutralized. They used the college as free labor. They used the Dragonborn as a weapon. Then they installed that weapon as Archmage to ensure cooperation. The entire questline wasn't about stopping Ancano. It was about reclaiming an artifact they've monitored for thousands of years. But if one organization manipulating events is disturbing, wait until you hear about the entire race that vanished and what one researcher proved happened. Arnilgain. The Dwemer race vanished simultaneously in 1E700 when Kagranak struck the heart of Lorkhan with tonal tools. Every account contradicts. Vivek claims they disappeared from the world. Ashlanders say they turned into dust. Yagrum Bagern, the sole survivor, was in an outer realm when it happened and has no idea what occurred. Even Vivek admits, "I have no sense of them in the timeless divine world outside of mortal time." College researcher Arnilgain secretly attempts to replicate the event. His quest has the Dragonborn obtain a warped soul gem as substitute for the heart and keening, one of Kagranak's actual tools. Arniel strikes the gem with keening once. Nothing. Twice. Nothing. The third strike, he vanishes in a flash. The quest completes. The Dragonborn receives summon Arniel's shade, calling his ghost. This is the most terrifying thing in Skyrim. This parallel is strongest evidence for the skin of the Numidium theory. Just as Arniel became a shade bound to the Dragonborn, summonable on command, the Dwemer became shades bound to the Numidium, their artificial god construct. Dwemer ghosts appeared in Morrowind's ruins during the Third Era, while Dagoth Ur built a Kulakan, a Numidium replica. When the Nerevarine destroyed a Kulakan, the ghosts stopped appearing. That temporal correlation strongly suggests Dwemer souls are tethered to Numidium-type constructs. So the Sill's remark cuts deepest. You wonder where the Dwemer have gone? Perhaps better to wonder why one remains. This implies Yagrum's survival, not the disappearance, is the true anomaly. Kagranak didn't achieve ascension. He created spectral servitude. The entire Dwemer race exists in tragic half-existence, and Arniel proved it's real by doing it to himself. Nobody at the college mentions Arniel's disappearance. Nobody investigates. You can summon his ghost in front of other mages and they don't react. The game treats his vanishing as minor footnote when it's confirmation of what happened to an entire civilization. Arniel didn't just solve Elder Scrolls' greatest mystery. He became the answer, and you can summon him at will, making him serve in combat. Exactly the nightmare fate the Dwemer suffer, but at least the Dwemer's fate was an accident. Unlike Skyrim's Civil War, designed to have no right answer. Ulfric's Stormcloak. The Thalmor dossier on Ulfric, found in Elenwen's Solar, is the most important document in Skyrim's politics. It classifies Ulfric as asset, uncooperative, dormant, and reveals the Thalmor broke him during the Great War. then made him believe information from his interrogation was crucial in capturing the Imperial City. The city had in fact fallen before he had broken. They manufactured guilt to make him manipulable, then let him escape. The operational notes are unambiguous. As long as the Civil War proceeds in its current indecisive fashion, we should remain hands-off. A Stormcloak victory must be avoided. An Imperial victory must also be avoided. The Thalmor's optimal scenario is perpetual war, men killing men while both sides weaken. The Helgen note confirms they intervened to prevent Ulfric's execution, because it would have ended the war too quickly. Ulfric is an unwitting pawn, an asset, not an agent. His anger is genuine, but deliberately cultivated. The Bear of Markarth describes his atrocity. After retaking the Reach, every official who worked for the Forsworn was put to the sword, even after they had surrendered. Yet the Empire's position is equally compromised. They nearly executed the Dragonborn without trial, and Jarl Balgruuf privately worships Talos while publicly enforcing the ban. Bethesda reinforced this ambiguity structurally. Extensive cut Civil War content was planned, but removed. No subsequent game confirms which side won. The player cannot share the Thalmor dossier with any NPC. The game provides no mechanism to expose the manipulation. By design, you can show Ulfric proof the Thalmor played him. Nothing happens. You can tell Tullius the enemy wants endless war. He doesn't care. The questline forces you to pick a side while revealing that picking either side serves the actual enemy. The game's season unending offers temporary peace to fight Alduin. The moment the dragon threat ends, they resume killing each other. The dragons nearly end the world, and both sides learned nothing. Players spent 13 years arguing whether Empire or Stormcloaks are right. That's the point. Bethesda designed the war so thoroughly ambiguous that both sides have legitimate grievances and fatal flaws. The Thalmor win either way, and the game never lets you expose the truth, because the truth doesn't matter when both sides are too proud to listen. But if one manipulated war is disturbing, wait until you hear the Thalmor might be trying to unmake reality itself. The Thalmor's endgame. The deepest mystery concerns the Thalmor's ultimate goal. Surface evidence shows political ambition. The White Gold Concordat, Talos bans, Justiciar patrols. But evidence suggests the Inner Circle pursues something far more radical. The systematic deactivation of metaphysical towers that anchor Mundus to existence, with the goal of unmaking the mortal world and returning Altmer to pre-creation divine state. The prophecy of the Dragonborn is explicitly a tower text. When the brass tower walks and time is reshaped, when the red tower trembles, when the white tower falls, when the snow tower lies sundered, kingless, the World Eater wakes. Each line references a tower deactivated across previous games. Red Tower, Heart of Lorkhan destroyed. White Gold Tower, Amulet of Kings destroyed when Martin sacrificed himself. Crystal-like Law fell during Oblivion Crisis. Walk Brass, Numidium, destroyed at Daggerfall. Only Adamantia and High Rock definitively remains active. Michael Kirkbride's Altmeri commentary on Talos provides framework. To kill man is to reach heaven. We must erase the upstart Talos from the mythic. His presence fortifies the wheel of convention and binds our souls to this plane. If Talos derives power from worship, then banning worship isn't political persecution. It's cosmological warfare to weaken a god who anchors mortal reality. In-game Thalmor behave as political actors, not cosmic villains. Yet ESO referenced towers explicitly. The prophecy is undeniably a tower text embedded in-game. The most likely synthesis: lower-ranking Thalmor pursue political dominion while the Inner Circle quietly works towards something most Altmer would never support. The Thalmor's Talos ban makes sense politically. It humiliates the Empire, but if Talos is a tower, if worship sustains his divine presence, if his existence anchors the mortal world, then the ban takes on apocalyptic significance. They're attempting deactivation of a metaphysical anchor holding reality together, and they're winning. Red Tower, destroyed. White Gold, deactivated. Crystal-like Law, fallen. Walk Brass, gone. Snow Tower, sundered, kingless, bleeding during Skyrim's Civil War. Only Adamantia remains, located exactly where Elder Scrolls 6 is set. Every game, another tower falls. Every game, reality becomes more unstable. The Thalmor, whether they fully understand or not, are orchestrating the slow unmaking of existence itself. The most disturbing possibility isn't that they'll fail, it's that they'll succeed, and by the time anyone realizes what's happening, it will be too late. Skyrim has hundreds of quests, but only a handful are so good they've been burned into the collective memory of an entire generation of gamers. From drunken blackouts orchestrated orchestrated by literal gods, to murder mysteries that punish you for getting the wrong answer. These are the quests that define the game, and we're starting with one that drops you into chaos with zero explanation. A night to remember. You wake up in a temple you've never been to. There's trash everywhere. A priestess is screaming at you about the mess you made, and your quest journal? Completely useless. No marker, no objective, no memory of what happened. Just a vague instruction to go figure it out. That's how A Night to Remember starts, and it's one of the greatest cold opens in Skyrim. Here's what happened. You met a stranger named Sam Gavent at a random tavern. He challenged you to a drinking contest. You accepted, because of course you did. And then you blacked out for 3 entire days. Now you have to retrace your steps across the entire province to piece together exactly what went down. The trail takes you to at least 4 different locations. Markarth, Rorikstead, the Bannered Mare, and Whiteaver. Every stop reveals another layer of absurdity. You apparently trashed a temple, stole a goat, got engaged to a hagraven, and somehow sold a wedding ring to a merchant who wants nothing to do with you. Each clue is more unhinged than the last, and the game plays it completely straight, which makes it 10 times funnier. But the real community splitting moment? The goat. You have to herd a live goat across Skyrim. It cannot die. If it dies, the quest breaks. Some players think this is comedy gold. Others have genuinely rage quit over it. There is no middle ground. And then comes the twist. Sam Gavent isn't just some random drunk. He's Sanguine, the Daedric prince of debauchery, and the entire night was his test. You weren't the one causing chaos. You were the mark. Every embarrassing thing you did was engineered by a god who wanted to see how far you'd go. That reframe hits different. Finishing the quest earns you Sanguine's Rose, a staff that summons a leveled Dremora to fight for you. The stronger you are, the nastier the Dremora it pulls in. You can't get it anywhere else in the base game, which is exactly why speedrunners love it, and roleplay communities treat it as the ultimate corruption artifact. But if a drunken prank from a Daedric prince sounds lighthearted, the next quest is the exact opposite, because Windhelm has a serial killer and nobody's doing anything about it. Blood on the Ice. Skyrim tried to make a murder mystery, and honestly, it almost worked. The quest drops you into Windhelm, a city that already feels like it's one bad day away from tearing itself apart. You walk through the graveyard at night, find a fresh corpse, a crowd gathering, and suddenly you're playing detective. No dragonborn powers, no shouts, just you, a dead body, and a city full of people who all seem like they could have done it. 3 suspects emerge over the course of the investigation. Calixto Corium, the eccentric collector. Wunferth, the unliving, the court wizard with a name that practically screams guilty. And a second killer introduced mid-quest that throws everything sideways. The evidence chain is genuinely clever. A journal, a strange amulet, a diary, and a knife, each one pointing in a different direction depending on when you find it and which crime scenes you've already visited. But here's where it gets interesting. The game will let you get it wrong. You can accuse Wunferth, have him thrown in prison, and the real killer, Calixto, just walks free. He stays in Windhelm. He keeps living his life. There's no correction, no secret cutscene where the guards figure it out, no game over screen. The injustice simply stands for the rest of your playthrough, and that's rare. Most games hold your hand through investigations and make sure you land on the right answer eventually. Skyrim just trusts you to fail and lets you live with it. Now the community is split on this one. Some players think Blood on the Ice is one of the best quests in the entire game because of that moral weight. Others think the investigation mechanics are shallow, and they're not entirely wrong. The quest was notoriously incomplete in vanilla Skyrim. A full Khajiit killer subplot was cut during development, leaving dialogue inconsistencies that fans have cataloged for years. That partially explains why the detective work feels thinner than the premise promises. And then there's the soft lock. If you kill Wunferth before speaking to him, the quest breaks permanently, not temporarily, permanently, across every version of Skyrim ever released. It has never been patched, one of the few true softlock states in the entire game, and Bethesda just left it there. So yeah, Blood on the Ice is ambitious, flawed, and weirdly unforgettable. But if you think a murder mystery is strange for Skyrim, wait until you meet the Daedric prince who throws a tea party inside a dead emperor's mind, the Mind of Madness. You're walking through solitude, minding your own business, when a beggar named Dervanin runs up to you begging for help. His master has gone missing, and he needs you to find him. Sounds simple enough. Maybe a rescue quest, maybe a dungeon crawl. Then he hands you a hip bone, Pelagius's hip bone, and you have to track down a key to the sealed wing of the royal palace from the Blue Palace staff, just to figure out what's going on. Everything goes sideways fast. The Pelagius wing is abandoned, boarded up, and covered in cobwebs. But you're not here for the architecture. The moment you step inside, you're ripped out of reality and dropped into a pocket dimension belonging to Sheogorath, the Daedric Prince of Madness. And what's he doing in this realm? Hosting a tea party with cheese, while casually tormenting the ghost of Emperor Pelagius III. Here's where it gets dark under all the comedy. Pelagius III is a real figure in Elder Scrolls history. He was a documented madman, an emperor whose reign was defined by paranoia, erratic behavior, and complete psychological collapse. Players just assumed that was regular medieval political stress. Nope. Sheogorath has been camping inside this man's mind for 25 years, playing games with his sanity like it's a toy. The entire historical record of Pelagius's madness was a Daedric prank. That's genuinely horrifying when you stop laughing long enough to think about it. The quest itself is brilliantly designed. Instead of combat, you navigate 3 encounters inside Pelagius's fractured psyche. You're shrinking and growing enemies, manipulating nightmares, turning paranoia against itself. Every puzzle is a commentary on the power imbalance between mortal minds and the beings that treat them like playthings. And Sheogorath's dialogue throughout is some of the most quotable writing in the entire game. The man talks about cheese wheels and existential dread in the same sentence, and somehow it works perfectly. But let's talk about the reward, because it deserves its own moment. The Wabbajack. This staff has dozens of documented random effects. You point it at an enemy and it might disintegrate them instantly, or it might turn them into a chicken, or it might heal them to full health in the middle of a fight. There is zero consistency, zero strategy, and zero reason not to love it. It's pure chaos in weapon form, and the community treats it like a sacred artifact. One last thing that still haunts lore discussions to this day. When Sheogorath reappears in the Dragonborn DLC, his memories don't line up. He references events from Oblivion in ways that contradict his own history. Players have spent years debating whether this is intentional character development, a continuity error, or something the developers left deliberately unanswered. Nobody has a definitive answer. And honestly, for the Prince of Madness, that feels exactly right. But if you think manipulating one emperor's mind is wild, wait until you hear about the quest where you actually assassinate one to kill an empire. Every questline in Skyrim builds to something, but the Dark Brotherhood doesn't build to a boss fight or a dungeon crawl. It builds to you assassinating the emperor of the known world. Let that sink in for a second. This isn't poisoning a merchant in his sleep or putting an arrow through some bandit chief. Titus Mede II is the single highest-ranking political figure in the entire Elder Scrolls universe at the time of Skyrim. He commands legions, he rules an empire, and the Dark Brotherhood sends you, one person, to kill him. Here's where the quest earns its reputation. The assassination unfolds across 2 separate quests. First, you infiltrate the Emperor's dinner at Castle Dour in Solitude, only to discover you've killed a decoy. Then the real target surfaces aboard the Kataraya, his personal ship, where you have to sneak past elite Penitus Oculatus agents to finish the job for real. The game practically forces you into stealth, poison, or magic. You have to think like an actual assassin, not a dragonborn who can shout people off cliffs. The shift from a crowded castle to a heavily guarded ship offers completely different tactical setups, and each one rewards creativity instead of punishing it. But here's the thing nobody talks about: the political consequences. When you kill Titus Mede II, you're not just completing a contract, you're destabilizing the entire Imperial power structure during an active civil war. The Stormcloaks and the Empire are literally fighting over Skyrim while you remove the head of one side. The game never pauses to spell this out. There's no cutscene showing the political fallout, no NPC monologue about the power vacuum, but the implication is massive. The Dark Brotherhood, a guild most players treat as a fun side activity, just committed an act that could reshape the entire continent. This is the moment the questline stops feeling like a side quest and starts feeling like a geopolitical event, and the game rewards you for engaging with it seriously. After the assassination, Nazir unlocks 12 unique named contract targets for you to hunt down. On top of that, the Night Mother feeds you an endless stream of radiant contracts, meaning the Brotherhood never truly runs out of work. That's a staggering amount of follow-on content that most players never fully explore because they've already moved on to the next shiny questline. Now, the community has debated the moral logic of this questline for over a decade, and honestly, the criticism holds weight. The early Brotherhood quests require you to murder innocents like Vittoria Vici, a woman whose only crime was getting married. Then the questline pivots to framing the Emperor's assassination as this grand, almost honorable professional act. The tonal whiplash is real. You go from cold-blooded murder of civilians to noble assassin fulfilling an ancient contract, and the game never acknowledges the contradiction. Some players love the moral ambiguity. Others think it's just sloppy writing pretending to be deep, but if you think killing the Emperor raises uncomfortable moral questions, wait until you meet Molag Bal. Because the next quest doesn't just ask you to do something dark, it forces you. The House of Horrors. Skyrim lets you do almost anything. You can kill essential NPCs with mods, ignore the main quest forever, join every faction, betray every faction, and generally play however you want. So when a quest takes that freedom away from you, it feels wrong, and that's exactly the point. The House of Horrors starts innocently enough. You're walking through Markarth, and a vigilant of Stendarr asks you to help investigate an abandoned house. Standard haunted house stuff. Doors slam, objects fly off shelves, something growls in the basement. You've seen this before in a dozen other games, but then Molag Bal shows up, and the quest becomes something else entirely. Here's the thing. Molag Bal Bal doesn't ask you for help. He doesn't offer you a deal. He gives you orders. 5 direct on-screen commands with 0 room for refusal. There's no persuasion option, no speech check, no clever dialogue branch that lets you outsmart a Daedric prince. The quest requires you to track down a priest named Logrolf the Willful, drag him back to the house, and then beat him into submission with a rusty mace until his will breaks completely. Every single step forward demands your active participation in psychological and physical torment. And before you say, just don't do the quest, that's literally the only alternative. There is no good path, no secret option where you free Logrolf, no hidden dialogue where you tell Molag Bal to shove it. The game presents you with exactly 2 choices: do horrible things, or walk away and never complete it. That's not a dark choice, that's the removal of choice, and it was built that way on purpose. Developer interviews confirmed that this quest was designed specifically as Skyrim's morally darkest side content. It functions as an ethical trap where the player's own completionist instinct becomes the mechanism of cruelty. You want to finish the quest, you want the reward, and Molag Bal knows that. The entire design exploits the fact that most players will do terrible things in a game simply because the game told them to. But here's where it gets genuinely unsettling. After you beat Logrolf into submission, Molag Bal doesn't let him go. He commands you to kill him, and the quest won't progress until you do. There's no mercy option, no way to spare him after everything you've already done. You beat a man until he broke, and then you execute him. The game doesn't let you halfway participate in cruelty. It makes you finish what you started. The community response has been polarized in ways most quests never achieve. Some players skip it entirely on roleplay grounds, refusing to put their character through it. Mental health professionals have actually cited this quest in academic discussions about morality design in games, and modders have created entire alternative quest paths that let you reject Molag Bal, because vanilla Skyrim never gives you that option. The fact that players felt compelled to build their own escape route tells you everything about how effective this quest is at making you uncomfortable. It's not Skyrim's scariest quest, it's not the most violent, but it might be the only one that makes you question whether completing it says something about you. But if psychological horror designed by a Daedric prince shook you, wait until you find a quest with 0 dialogue, 0 NPCs, and somehow even more emotional devastation. Frostflow Abyss. There's no quest marker, no NPC waiting to give you a speech, no objective popping up in the corner of your screen telling you where to go or what to do. Frostflow Lighthouse doesn't ask you to play it. It just sits there, perched on the frozen coastline, waiting for the one player curious enough to walk inside and start reading. And that's exactly what makes it one of the best quests Skyrim ever produced. Here's how it starts. You find a body. On that body, there's a journal. The journal references a family, a lighthouse, and a life that went horribly wrong. That's it. That's your entire quest briefing. No dialogue wheel, no compass marker, no quest added notification. The game hands you a dead person and a piece of paper and says, figure it out. Most players walk right past it. Speedrunners skip it entirely because the reward is easy to miss, and the quest has absolutely no formal quest giver. From a pure gameplay efficiency standpoint, Frostflow Lighthouse is a detour, but from a storytelling standpoint, it might be the single most devastating piece of environmental narrative Bethesda ever built. The location stretches deep beneath the lighthouse into a network of tunnels. Each chamber adds a new layer to a family's destruction, told entirely through corpses, scattered journals, and the physical arrangement of human remains. The journals document a lighthouse keeper named Habd, his wife Ramadi, and their 2 children, Sudi and Mani. The first entry sounds hopeful, a family starting fresh at a remote lighthouse. The second sounds worried. The third sounds broken. The fourth barely sounds human. And then you reach the depths. Falmer, Shorus. The tunnels beneath the lighthouse had been infested long before the family arrived, and one by one, every member was dragged into the darkness. Mani went first, pulled underground. Sudi followed, trying to save him. Ramadi was killed defending the entrance, and Habd, the father, went down alone into the caves to find his children, knowing he would never come back out. The evidence doesn't suggest a rescue mission. It screams a suicide run. Nobody spells it out for you. Nobody holds your hand through the revelation. You just stand there, reading the final journal, and the math does itself. But here's where it gets worse. The only thing waiting at the bottom is a unique Chorus Reaper, the massive insectoid horror that claimed the family. Its nest is surrounded by the remains of people it consumed. You don't need a cutscene. You don't need exposition. You just need to look at what's left of Habd's family and understand that this is what the lighthouse was sitting on top of the entire time. This is Skyrim trusting the player completely. No hand-holding, no breadcrumbs, just a trail of evidence that you either follow or you don't. The only reward is a quiet one. If you carry Habd's remains back to the lighthouse brazier and place them inside, you receive Sailor's Repose, a permanent effect that boosts your healing spells by 10%. It's not flashy, it's a memorial. Creepypasta writers and horror content creators have cited Frostflow Lighthouse repeatedly as one of gaming's most underrated environmental horror experiences, experiences? And they're right. It's proof that Skyrim could tell a complete, devastating, gut-wrenching story without a single line of spoken dialogue. Zero voice acting. One quiet reward, maximum horror. But if Frostflow Lighthouse proves Skyrim can tell a story through silence, the next quest proves it can tell one through sheer overwhelming scale. Touching the sky. Most quests in Skyrim build to a final boss and call it a day. Touching the sky builds to a final boss, a divine weapon, a thematic payoff, and one of the most visually stunning sequences in the entire game, and it earns every single one of them. This is the climax of the Dawnguard DLC's Vampire Hunter questline, and it does not ease you into it. The quest drops you into Darkfall Cave, a sprawling underground nightmare packed with Falmer who want nothing more than to end your run right there. Direct combat works, but stealth is optimal, and the game knows it. Every encounter in that cave feels like a test, a gauntlet designed to make sure you actually deserve what's waiting at the end. And what's waiting at the end is Arch-Curate Vurthur. Here's the thing about Vurthur. He's not just another health bar you chip away at until a cutscene plays. He's a corrupted snow elf who's been manipulating events from the shadows, and when you finally confront him at the Chantry of Auriel, he throws everything he has at you. Waves of frozen Falmer, collapsing architecture, and his own devastating frost magic that punishes anyone who thought they could brute force their way through. For a game that's frequently criticized for its boss design, Vurthur is a genuine standout. He feels like a real fight, not a scripted inevitability. But the real star of this quest isn't the boss, it's the reward. Auriel's bow is a divine artifact that literally channels the power of the sun. You can load it with sun-hallowed arrows that deal devastating sun damage to enemies, turning the sky itself into a weapon against the undead. But here's the kicker. If you use blood-cursed arrows instead, you can blot out the sun entirely, giving vampires free reign to walk the surface without burning. Think about that for a second. You've spent the entire Dawnguard questline asking one question: can vampires actually be stopped? And the answer is a bow handed down by a sun god that can either destroy them or empower them, depending on whose side you're really on. That's not just a cool weapon. That's clean storytelling. The mechanical payoff is equally personalized. If you're playing as a vampire yourself, those blood-cursed arrows become your greatest tool. If you sided fully with the Dawnguard, sun-hallowed arrows turn you into the sun god's personal instrument of destruction. The game literally tailors your reward based on who you chose to be. That's rare for Skyrim. Now, here's where the community splits. At roughly 35 to 40 minutes for experienced players, touching the sky is one of the longest individual quests in the game. Dawnguard fans consider it the DLC's absolute best content, the moment everything clicks into place. Detractors argue the pacing makes it feel more like an endurance test than a climax. Both sides have a point. The cave section drags for some players, and the payoff doesn't land if you're already exhausted by the time you reach Vurthur. But for everyone else, the thematic weight of wielding a divine bow after hours of hunting through Falmer-infested caverns is one of the most satisfying conclusions Skyrim has ever delivered. It's not perfect, but it's earned. And if you think a corrupted snow elf makes for a dangerous final confrontation, wait until you see what the Thieves Guild has waiting for you underground. Blindsided. Most quests in Skyrim punish you for picking the dark side. You join the evil faction. You get worse gear, weaker abilities, and a narrative that constantly reminds you that you made the wrong choice. The Vampire Path in the Dawnguard DLC is the exception that proves the rule, and it's one of the most fascinating design decisions Bethesda ever made. Kindred Judgment is the climax quest for both factions in the Dawnguard DLC. If the Dawnguard Path has you wielding divine solar power against the undead, the Vampire Path is its mirror image. Same DLC, same stakes, completely opposite consequences. And here's the thing, the game treats both paths as mechanically equal. That almost never happens. Let me explain why that matters. Committing to Harkon's Vampire faction locks you out of all Dawnguard-aligned content permanently. This isn't one of those soft Skyrim choices where you can just circle back later and play both sides. The moment you side with the Volkihar vampires and see this questline through, every piece of Dawnguard content, every reward, every NPC interaction on that side of the fence is gone forever. The final confrontation forces a direct moral choice that the game treats as completely irreversible. You pick a side and you live with it. But here's where it gets interesting. The reward for going full vampire isn't some watered-down consolation prize. You get the Vampire Lord form as a permanent ability, and it comes loaded with its own full perk tree. Power of the Grave, Vampiric Grip, Summon Gargoyle, Corpse Curse, Supernatural Reflexes, and Mist Form, just to name a few. That's a full suite of combat tools that matches or exceeds what you'd get from the Dawnguard faction in raw mechanical terms. And that's not an accident. Bethesda deliberately balanced the two paths so that neither one punishes the player for their choice. The vampire side gives you raw transformative power. The Dawnguard side gives you Auriel's bow and sun-based weaponry. Different tools, different playstyles, genuinely equivalent value. In a game where joining the Dark Brotherhood or becoming a werewolf often comes with hidden downsides, this symmetry is remarkable. It's a design statement about moral equivalence. The game is literally saying both choices are valid. The community has never agreed on which path is right, and that's exactly the point. Vampire roleplay communities have done extensive character analysis on Harkon specifically, arguing that his questline offers a legitimate narrative arc, not just villain cosplay with good stat bonuses. But the broader player base splits hard. Some people see the vampire path as morally indefensible regardless of how good the powers are. Others argue that the mechanical balance proves Bethesda intended both paths as equally canon. Nobody has settled this debate. Years later, which Dawnguard path is the real one remains one of Skyrim's most genuinely divisive questions. Not because one side is obviously correct, but because the game refused to tip the scales. That kind of balanced faction design is rare enough in Skyrim, but if you want to see what happens when the game goes completely off the rails with power and cosmic horror, wait until we talk about the Dragonborn DLC's final quest. At the Summit of Apocrypha. Apocrypha is genuinely unlike anything else in Skyrim. Every other location in the game, even the most alien ones, still follows a basic logic. Caves have rocks, ruins have stone, Dwemer cities have metal. Apocrypha has none of that. It's a dimension made entirely of infinite black-tentacled libraries, shifting architecture that rearranges itself while you're standing in it, and environmental hazards that literally don't exist anywhere else in the game. We're talking plane shifting, dimensional instability, text-based traps. The realm is divided into 8 distinct segments, and each one feels like walking deeper into the mind of something that stopped being sane a very long time ago. This is Hermaeus Mora's domain, the Daedric Prince of Forbidden Knowledge, and navigating it is the final challenge of the Dragonborn DLC. But the atmosphere isn't what makes this quest unforgettable. Miraak is. Here's the thing about Miraak that most players don't fully appreciate until they're standing across from him. This isn't just some dragon priest. This is the original Dragonborn. 4,000 years before the player's character ever absorbed a dragon's soul, Miraak was doing exactly the same thing. He ruled Skyrim. He bent dragons to his will. He was everything the player is, except he got there first. And then Hermaeus Mora trapped him in Apocrypha as his personal champion, where he's been rotting for 4 millennia, waiting. The fight itself is mechanically one of Skyrim's best boss encounters. Miraak fights across 3 distinct health phases, and he uses the Bend Will Shout, a shout powerful enough to control dragons and bend powerful enemies to your command. Every time you think you've broken him, he regenerates by consuming one of the dragons circling overhead. It's dramatic, it's frustrating in the best way, and defeating him rewards you with every dragon soul Miraak stole from you throughout the quest line, plus 6 additional souls from his death, and the final word of Bend Will itself. That's not a reward, that's an inheritance. But here's where it gets dark. You don't actually defeat Miraak, not really. At the climax of the fight, when Miraak is weakened and desperate, Hermaeus Mora personally intervenes. Tentacles erupt from the ground, impale Miraak, and drain the life out of him while you watch. A Daedric prince just threw away 4,000 years of loyalty, 4,000 years of service from his chosen champion, and sacrificed him like he was nothing. Why? Because someone more useful just walked in. You. The player doesn't defeat a Daedric prince's servant. The player becomes the new one. Hermaeus Mora doesn't care about Miraak, never did. Miraak was a placeholder, a tool kept sharp until a better tool came along. And the moment you proved you were stronger, Mora discarded 4 millennia of investment without a second thought. That's not a boss fight. That's a job interview where the previous employee gets murdered in front of you as a signing bonus. It's one of the coldest moments in Elder Scrolls history. Now, the community is genuinely split on this quest. The atmosphere is universally praised. Apocrypha is stunning. The Hermaeus Mora betrayal is one of the most discussed narrative moments in the entire DLC. But Miraak himself? A lot of players feel he was underdeveloped. Here's a character who should have been one of the most compelling antagonists in the franchise. The original Dragonborn, trapped for thousands of years, finally facing his replacement. That's an incredible premise. But his actual backstory, his motivations, his personality, they feel thin. You fight him, he monologues briefly, and then a god kills him for you. Players wanted more. They wanted conversations, history, maybe even a moment of empathy between 2 people who share the same curse. Modders have spent years creating extensive alternative versions of this questline specifically to flesh out Miraak's character, and that tells you everything. When the community builds what the developers didn't, it means the foundation was strong enough to deserve better. But if you think replacing a god's champion is a dramatic finale, wait until you see what happens when you face the literal end of the world. Dragon's Lair, every other quest on this list pits you against a faction, a person, or a monster. This one pits you against the end of everything. Alduin isn't a villain. He's not a boss. He's a primordial cosmic entity whose entire purpose in Elder Scrolls mythology is to devour the world so it can be reborn. That's not a threat. That's a function of reality, and the game sends you to kill it with a sword and some shouting. But before you even get to the fight, you have to get to Sovngarde. And Sovngarde is the real reward. Ward. You access it through a portal inside Skuldafn, an ancient Nordic temple high in the mountains that serves as Alduin's base of operations. The second you step through, everything changes. This is the Nordic afterlife. The sky burns gold. The Hall of Valor rises in the distance. The honored dead of every era stand waiting, and all of it is being consumed by a massive soul-devouring storm that Alduin created to harvest the dead and fuel his own power. The greatest warriors in Nordic history are literally being eaten, and they can't stop it. That's the atmosphere you walk into, and the game earns it. Every dragon fight, every shout learned, every step of the main quest was building to this exact moment. You standing in the land of the dead, watching a god feed. The fight itself begins with Alduin's storm blanketing Sovngarde in a thick, disorienting mist. You can't just charge in. The mist swallows everything. The dead heroes fighting alongside you can barely find each other, and Alduin circles overhead untouchable. You have to use clear skies to burn the mist away, turning the dragon's own atmospheric weapon against him. Only then does the real combat begin. Direct confrontation against a dragon with 3,000 HP who wields fire breath, frost breath, unrelenting force, and his dragon storm call. And here's the detail that makes this fight genuinely brilliant. Alduin possesses a temporal shout, Slen Tid Vo, the same class of power that defines the Dragonborn, the ability to bend time itself. The final battle of Skyrim's main quest is a fight between a mortal with the soul of a dragon and a god who was supposed to end the world. The contested resource between them isn't health, isn't stamina, isn't magicka. It's mastery over the Thu'um itself. That's not just a cool mechanic. That's thematically perfect. Now, let's address the obvious. A huge portion of the community considers Alduin an anticlimactic final boss. Players who invested in melee builds find the shout-dependent design limiting. The fight itself is shorter and arguably less demanding than some random dragon encounters you stumble into at level 30. People beat Alduin and think, that's it? And honestly, they're not wrong about the difficulty, but they're missing the point. Alduin was never designed to be a satisfying mechanical challenge. He was designed to be defeated. The point of Dragon Slayer isn't the health bar, it's the arrival. It's standing in Sovngarde with the weight of every dead Nord watching. It's the slow, quiet realization that you just killed the thing that was supposed to end all of existence. Not outsmarted it, not outlasted it, just ended it, because that's what Dragonborns do. And then comes the part nobody talks about enough. After Alduin falls, the quest completes. The main storyline ends, and the world goes quiet. Dragons still spawn, but they're leaderless. The Greybeards acknowledge what you've done. Guards mumble about it, but there's no next objective, no new crisis, no cutscene telling you what happens next. For a game defined entirely by its openness, by the promise that there's always something else over the next hill, that stillness is the ending. You saved everything, and now there's nowhere left to go but home. That's Skyrim, a game with hundreds of quests, thousands of hours of content, and an ending that doesn't feel like an ending at all. It feels like the world just keeps going, exactly the way it always did, except now you know what it cost to keep it that way. From buried truths to shared unease, Skyrim's most disturbing mysteries explained. The Falmer. The Falmer are disturbing because they aren't a fallen civilization. They're a civilization that was deliberately interrupted and forced to keep going in a broken form. Everything we encounter underground contradicts the idea that the Falmer are mindless creatures. They don't move randomly. They patrol defined areas. They set traps and choke points and ambush from positions that favor sound rather than sight. They retreat when overwhelmed and regroup in numbers. This isn't animal behavior. It's tactical behavior adapted to blindness. Their environment tells the same story. Falmer settlements aren't chaotic nests. They're organized spaces. Living areas are separated from guard routes. Chorus aren't just present. They're managed. Eggs are protected. Adult Chorus are deployed like tools or weapons. There's also clear evidence of ritual, totems, markings, guarded chambers that serve no practical purpose in combat. These spaces exist for meaning, not survival, and meaning requires memory. Lore fills in what the environment implies. The Falmer were once the Snow Elves, a surface-dwelling civilization with cities, religion, and culture. After the Night of Tears nearly wiped them out, they turned to the Dwemer for refuge. The Dwemer didn't kill them. They blinded them, slowly, systematically, across generations, through toxins that removed sight and erased the ability to pass down history, language, and written knowledge. The Snow Elves weren't destroyed. They were rendered incapable of remaining what they were. This is what makes the Falmer so unsettling. They didn't lose a war. They didn't collapse internally. They weren't wiped out by time, they were modified. What we see in Skyrim isn't a species regressing into savagery. It's a society rebuilding itself under extreme constraint. Intelligence survived. Social behavior survived. What didn't survive was continuity. Every generation had to relearn what it meant to exist without ever knowing why they were underground in the first place. That means the Falmer aren't frozen in a tragic end state. They're still adapting, and adaptation doesn't stop. Given enough time, a culture shaped entirely by darkness, isolation, and hostility toward the surface will stabilize. Traditions will harden. Belief systems will form around survival rather than memory. Violence won't feel like cruelty. It'll feel like inheritance. Skyrim never lets us see where that process leads. Instead, it drops us into the middle of it as invaders, and never asks us to acknowledge what we're interrupting. There's no quest to cure the Falmer, no attempt to communicate, no recognition that what we're killing might be the early stages of a new civilization. That silence is intentional, because the Falmer aren't meant to be a tragedy you resolve. They're meant to be a reminder of what happens when survival is offered without mercy, and how long the consequences can last. And if the Falmer show what happens when a people are reshaped against their will, the next mystery asks the obvious follow-up: who had the power to do that to an entire civilization? And what happened when they finally went too far? The Dwemer. The Dwemer are disturbing because they didn't fear the gods. They believed existence itself was something that could be engineered, optimized, and ultimately overwritten. Everything the Dwemer left behind reflects a worldview that rejected reverence in favor of control. Their cities aren't built like temples or palaces, they're industrial, functional, purpose-driven. Pipes run through walls, automatons patrol on schedules, doors open and close based on logic, not ritual. Even their greatest achievements weren't acts of worship, they were experiments. The Dwemer studied the heart of Lorkhan not as a divine relic, but as a power source. Tonal architecture wasn't magic fueled by belief. It was mathematics, resonance, and sound used to alter reality at a structural level. To the Dwemer, gods weren't sacred beings. They were flawed systems that could be replicated or improved. And then there's the disappearance. When the Dwemer vanished, they didn't leave bodies. They didn't leave ghosts. In a world overflowing with restless spirits and lingering souls, the absence of Dwemer remains is almost louder than any ruin. What they did leave behind is even more unsettling. Fully operational cities. Automatons still follow commands. Defense systems still activate. Elevators still run. Their infrastructure didn't decay the way other civilizations' ruins did. It simply kept going, as if waiting for input that never came. That's what makes the Dwemer fundamentally different from every other lost civilization in Skyrim. They didn't collapse because of arrogance or decadence. They didn't fall to invasion or internal decay. They reached a point where their understanding of reality became incompatible with reality itself. When Kagrenac struck the heart of Lorkhan, the Dwemer weren't attempting destruction. They were attempting translation, rewriting their existence into a state that no longer relied on gods, fate, or limitation. And the result wasn't chaos, it was removal. The universe didn't punish them publicly. It didn't leave a warning. It simply corrected the problem by erasing the Dwemer from the equation entirely. That outcome reframes every Dwemer ruin you explore. These aren't monuments to failure. They're remnants of a civilization that got far enough to test the boundaries of existence, and crossed one that couldn't be crossed twice. The machines still running aren't proof of success. They're proof that the rules remained intact, even after the people who tried to rewrite them were gone. And if the Dwemer believed reality could be controlled, the next mystery reveals where that belief was pushed the furthest. Because beneath Skyrim itself lies the place where they tried to build a world that didn't need the surface at all. Blackreach. Blackreach is disturbing because it proves the Dwemer didn't just study reality. They tried to replace the world above with one that could survive without it. The scale of Blackreach immediately breaks expectations. This isn't a mine or a hidden laboratory. It's a vast, self-contained environment. Artificial skies glow overhead. Energy sources power cities spread across enormous distances. Transportation systems connect districts designed for long-term use. This place supports life. Falmer don't merely hide here. They inhabit it. Settlements are established. Territory is defended. Creatures have evolved around the constant glow of bioluminescent flora. Even the Crimson Nirnroot exists only here, altered by isolation in a way nothing on the surface ever was. Most unsettling of all is how intact it feels. Blackreach didn't collapse when the Dwemer vanished. It didn't cave in, flood, or decay into chaos. It kept functioning quietly beneath Skyrim, unnoticed, while history played out above. And Skyrim never explains how long it was down there. That silence changes what Blackreach represents. This wasn't an experimental side project. It was infrastructure, a contingency, a place designed to exist independently of surface politics, divine interference, or environmental collapse. The Dwemer weren't just preparing to transcend reality, they were preparing for the surface world to become irrelevant. Blackreach reframes Dwemer ambition entirely. They didn't just want godhood, they wanted autonomy from the entire structure of the world, a reality where sunlight, weather, and even history weren't necessary conditions for survival. And when the Dwemer disappeared, Blackreach didn't fail, it adapted. New inhabitants moved in. New ecosystems stabilized. The world below kept going without its creators, a replacement world that never needed to announce itself. That realization unsettles players because it suggests the surface of Skyrim isn't the foundation of the world, it's just the most recent layer. And if Blackreach shows what happens when a civilization tries to outlast the world itself, the next mystery reveals the opposite response to eternity. Those who didn't try to replace time, but instead learned how to rule by waiting for it. The Dragon Priests. The Dragon Priests are disturbing not because they survived death, but because death was never meant to stop them in the first place. Everything about the Dragon Priests suggests preparation, rather than desperation. Their resting places aren't crude tombs or mass graves. They're sealed structures built to endure centuries without decay. Stone doors lock from the inside. Inner chambers are protected by layered defenses. Traps are positioned not to keep intruders out forever, but to delay them. Then there are the masks. Each Dragon Priest mask isn't just a symbol of rank. It's a conduit, a vessel that stores power, enhances longevity, and preserves identity. Even separated from their wearers, the masks remain potent artifacts, capable of altering reality itself when gathered together. And when a Dragon Priest awakens, their behavior tells you everything you need to know. They aren't confused. They don't react like beings ripped out of time. They don't question where the world went. They rise, assess the situation, and act, as if the centuries between then and now barely register. This is what makes the Dragon Priests unsettling on a deeper level. They didn't cling to immortality out of fear. They weren't trying to escape death the way leeches or necromancers do. They treated death as an inconvenience. The dragon cult was built on certainty. Certainty that dragons were eternal, that Alduin would return, and that mortal rebellion was a temporary disruption, not an ending. From that perspective, waiting wasn't a risk, it was strategy. Time, to the Dragon Priests, wasn't something that eroded power. It was something that filtered out the weak. Empires would rise and fall. Faith would fracture. History would forget. But when the world circled back, and they believed it always would, they intended to still be there. And in an uncomfortable way, they were right. Dragons do return. Alduin does reappear. The old order almost reasserts itself. The only thing that truly changed was the presence of the Dragonborn, an anomaly they didn't plan for, which reframes the Dragon Priests entirely. They aren't relics of a failed regime. They're remnants of a system that assumed it would eventually resume control. A system that wasn't defeated, just interrupted. And if the Dragon Priests prove that some power structures don't die, but simply wait, the next mystery asks something even worse. What happens when authority doesn't even need to wait at all? Helgen, fate didn't choose you. It replaced someone. The opening of Skyrim is disturbing because it suggests you weren't chosen by destiny. You were simply the most convenient person to die. The game begins with you bound on an execution cart in Skyrim, heading toward Helgen. Everyone else on that cart has context. Ulfric Stormcloak is a political prisoner. Ralof is a captured rebel. Lokir is a thief who panics and tries to run. You, on the other hand, have no crime, no accusation, and no explanation. When the Imperial officer checks the list, your name isn't there. That should stop the execution. Instead, the response is chillingly casual. Forget the list. He goes to the block. No investigation, no delay, no concern. You're not being punished for something you did. You're being processed because the system has already decided someone needs to die. Even after Alduin attacks, nobody ever follows up. No one asks who you were, why you were there, or whether the execution was a mistake. The moment passes, and the world moves on. This reframes the entire narrative in a quiet but unsettling way. Skyrim is a world obsessed with prophecy, lineage, and divine selection. Yet your story begins without any of that. You aren't identified as special. You aren't recognized as important. You are entirely disposable, and that's the key detail. Destiny doesn't intervene because you were chosen. Destiny intervenes after you survive. The moment you live through something you weren't supposed to, the world adapts around you. Prophecy bends. Gods take notice. History rewrites itself to accommodate the anomaly that slipped through the cracks. In other words, the Dragonborn wasn't selected in advance. The Dragonborn was retrofitted into the story. That implication unsettles players because it strips away the comfort of fate. Greatness doesn't come from worthiness or prophecy. It comes from surviving a system that never intended to spare you. Helgen isn't the beginning of a hero's journey. It's proof that the world is willing to kill the wrong person and call it order. And if Helgen shows how easily a system can erase someone by mistake, the next mystery goes even further, exploring what happens when power no longer needs identity, proof, or even a living voice to function at all. The Daedric Princes. The Daedric Princes are disturbing because they don't corrupt the world by force. They reveal how easily people will do it themselves when the rules stop pushing back. Every Daedric encounter begins the same quiet way. A voice reaches out with clarity instead of menace. There's no grand deception, no moral camouflage. Each prince is upfront about who they are and what they value. Molag Bal doesn't hide domination behind noble language. He frames cruelty as inevitability. Boethia treats betrayal as a tool for sorting the strong from the weak. Sheogorath makes chaos sound playful, even therapeutic. None of them pretend their requests are harmless. They just make them specific. What's crucial is how these quests are structured. You're rarely rushed. You're given time to consider the request, understand the task, and weigh the reward. And those rewards matter. Daedric artifacts aren't cosmetic trophies. They're powerful, build-defining tools that meaningfully change how the game plays. Afterward, nothing reacts. The towns don't whisper, the guards don't comment, the world doesn't tilt toward punishment or redemption. From Skyrim's perspective, what you did registers as a completed objective, nothing more. That lack of response is where the unease lives. The Daedric Princes aren't testing your morality, they're testing the system. They operate in a space where consequences are delayed, diffuse, or invisible. By doing so, they expose a weakness in how meaning is enforced. If wrongdoing isn't immediately corrected, does it still matter? Skyrim never answers that question for you, and that's intentional. The moment the game labels your choice as evil, it turns the experience into a lesson. Instead, it treats your actions as data points, decisions made under conditions of clarity and incentive. This reframes the princes as something more subtle than villains. They're not trying to conquer Tamriel. They're running long-term experiments on agency. Each contract measures how far someone will go when the universe offers no immediate resistance and no visible cost. And the uncomfortable truth players discover is that saying yes doesn't require desperation. It often requires convenience. The task is manageable. The reward is useful. The harm is someone else's problem. By the time you realize what you've agreed to, you've already benefited, and the game has moved on. That lingering silence isn't a flaw. It's the point. Power doesn't always announce itself with spectacle. Sometimes it just asks politely and waits to see who accepts. And if the Daedric Princes show how easily authority works with consent, the next mystery strips even that away, revealing what happens when power continues operating without a voice, a body, or proof that it ever existed at all. The Night Mother. The Night Mother is unsettling in a way that sneaks up on you. At first, it feels almost theatrical. A corpse wrapped in ritual, a coffin hidden beneath a sanctuary, whispers in the dark that sound just vague enough to be mystical without committing to anything concrete. Most players' first reaction isn't fear, it's skepticism, because the idea is absurd on the surface. An entire assassin order taking orders from a dead body. No witnesses, no verification, just faith and a lot of murder. And Skyrim never actually proves the Night Mother speaks. That's the important part. You're told she does. You're shown characters reacting as if she does. You're rewarded for obeying her commands. But the game never steps in to confirm that the voice is divine, supernatural, or even external, which means there are only a few possibilities, and all of them are uncomfortable. Maybe the Night Mother really does commune with Sithis, acting as a living conduit between mortals and a god of nothingness. That's unsettling on its own, but at least it follows the internal logic of the world, or maybe the voice is something else. A Daedric influence, a psychic projection, a remnant of belief so strong it manifests as perceived instruction. Or maybe there is no voice at all. Maybe the Dark Brotherhood has been operating on tradition and expectation for so long that the system no longer needs a source. Orders are interpreted. Authority is assumed. Doubt is treated as heresy. And the machine keeps running. That's where the Night Mother stops being creepy and starts being disturbing. Because whether she's real or not doesn't change the outcome. People still die. Contracts are still fulfilled. Loyalty is still enforced. From the outside, the Dark Brotherhood functions efficiently, regardless of whether its spiritual core exists. The Night Mother doesn't need to be proven because questioning her would destabilize the structure built around her, and Skyrim never lets you challenge that. You can't expose the truth, you can't demand proof, you can't pull the thread and see what happens. You either participate or walk away. What makes this mystery resonate with players worldwide is how familiar it feels. Not as fantasy horror, but as a real-world pattern. Systems built on belief don't collapse when the belief is questioned. They collapse when people stop acting as if it matters, and the Dark Brotherhood hasn't reached that point. So the Night Mother remains, sealed in her coffin, issuing commands that may or may not be divine, while an entire organization continues to kill in her name. Skyrim never tells you which explanation is correct. It just lets the system persist, quietly, efficiently, and without accountability. And if the Night Mother shows how power can persist without proof or presence, the next mystery asks something even more uncomfortable. What happens when the world itself starts bending around a single person instead? The Dragonborn. The Dragonborn is disturbing because the world doesn't just respond to you, it waits for you. Over time, a pattern becomes hard to ignore. Major events in Skyrim don't resolve themselves. Civil unrest stalls. Dragons don't reappear until you do. Ancient threats sit dormant, sometimes for centuries, until the moment you step into the right place. Quests pause in a state of permanent tension. NPCs repeat the same lines. Entire regions remain frozen in crisis, until your involvement triggers progression. Even prophecy bends around your presence. It doesn't guide you forward so much as activate once you arrive. Then there's the way power accumulates. You absorb dragon souls effortlessly. You master abilities in days that took others lifetimes. Gods don't test you, they negotiate. Ancient forces don't overwhelm you, they adapt. The world seems less interested in stopping you than in accounting for you. And when you stop playing, everything stops with you. Wars don't conclude, rebellions don't escalate, suffering doesn't resolve or worsen. Skyrim holds its breath indefinitely. This reframes the Dragonborn as something far stranger than a chosen hero. You aren't simply powerful, you're a narrative pressure point, a stabilizing anomaly that allows stalled systems to move forward. The world doesn't revolve around you because you're righteous. It does so because nothing progresses without a focal point. That's unsettling because it strips away the romance of destiny. The Dragonborn isn't a savior sent to fix the world. You're a mechanism, a catalyst that forces resolution by existing where nothing else can. And that kind of power is isolating. You don't share it. You don't pass it on. You don't even fully understand it. Skyrim never acknowledges this directly, but the implication lingers. Without you, the world is inert. With you, it reshapes itself just enough to keep functioning, which raises an uncomfortable question players rarely like sitting with. Is the Dragonborn protecting the world, or is the world trapped in a state that only functions while you're watching? And if the Dragonborn shows how reality can bend around one person, the next mystery pulls back even further, revealing what happens when an entire war exists, not to be solved, but simply to continue. The Civil War. The Skyrim Civil War is disturbing because it isn't meant to be resolved. It's meant to persist, regardless of who wins. On the surface, the war looks like a familiar choice. Imperials or Stormcloaks? Order versus independence? Stability versus identity? The game frames it like a decision that will define the future of Skyrim. But once you actually participate, the cracks start showing. Battles are strangely contained. Cities change banners, but daily life barely improves. Key figures survive or disappear with little consequence. Even after the war concludes, dialogue reflects exhaustion rather than relief. Guards sound tired. NPCs speak as if something unresolved still lingers. Most telling of all is how little the larger forces seem affected. The Thalmor remain influential no matter the outcome. Skyrim's economy doesn't recover. Social divisions don't heal, they harden. The winner inherits a weakened province filled with resentment, grief, and political instability, and the war only moves forward when you intervene. Without the Dragonborn, it stalls indefinitely, locked in a perpetual state of tension. That's what makes the Civil War unsettling. It isn't a story about victory, it's a story about decline. Both sides are compromised before you ever choose. The Imperials are stretched thin, enforcing an unpopular peace under foreign pressure. The Stormcloaks fight for cultural identity, but their leadership relies on exclusion and mythologized grievance. Neither side is positioned to rebuild Skyrim into something stronger than it was before. The war exists to drain resources, morale, and unity. From that perspective, the Civil War starts to feel less like a struggle for the future and more like a symptom of something already broken. Skyrim isn't on the brink of collapse, it's already sliding, and the war is how that decay expresses itself. What's especially uncomfortable is how familiar this feels. The conflict isn't driven by hope, It's driven by fatigue, fear, and the refusal to back down. Resolution would require compromise, and compromise isn't something either side is capable of without losing the identity they're fighting for. So, the war doesn't aim for healing. It aims for continuation, and no matter who you side with, that's exactly what you get. And if the Civil War shows a world slowly breaking under its own weight, the final mystery asks something even darker. What happens when even death stops being an escape? Sovngarde is disturbing because it reveals that death, even in a promised afterlife, is not an ending. It's just another place something powerful can reach. Sovngarde is introduced as a reward, a warrior's paradise reserved for those who lived and died with honor. The songs, the myths, the Hall of Valor, everything about it suggests finality, rest, completion. Then you arrive, and the first thing you notice isn't glory, it's emptiness. The landscape is vast but quiet. Figures wander the mist, detached and subdued. Conversations don't sound triumphant. They sound stalled, as if everyone is waiting for something that hasn't happened yet. The Hall of Valor itself feels less like a celebration and more like a shelter. That unease sharpens when the truth becomes clear. Alduin feeds here, not symbolically, not metaphorically. He consumes souls in Sovngarde itself, which means the Nord afterlife, the ultimate destination, isn't beyond danger. It's part of the food chain. This changes everything. Sovngarde isn't a final refuge. It's a holding space, a place where identity persists just long enough to be taken. The dead aren't resting. They're delayed, and that delay only lasts as long as something stronger isn't hungry. What makes this unsettling isn't just Alduin's presence. It's what his presence implies about the structure of existence. Even the afterlife is subject to predation. Even gods can starve. Even eternity can be interrupted. Skyrim presents Sovngarde as beautiful because it has to be. If it looked like a nightmare, the truth would be obvious. Instead, the horror is quieter. The realization that no place is truly outside the system. Not the world of the living, not the realm of the dead, not even a paradise promised by myth. Sovngarde doesn't comfort you, it warns you. And once you understand that even death can be compromised, you're left with one final uncomfortable thought. If there's nowhere beyond reach, then nothing in Skyrim was ever truly safe to begin with. If you enjoyed Skyrim's most disturbing mysteries and want to see more, click the video on screen now.